Chapter 1. 5 years after Naruto's birth. Hashirama inhaled the steam rising from his tea, a contented sigh escaping his lips as the earthy aroma filled his senses. Age had a curious way of reshaping a man's desires. Where once he chased dreams of peace and the thrill of battle, he now found a profound appreciation for the simple warmth of a ceramic cup against his calloused palms. It's not the same without Mito, though, he thought, the smile fading from his weathered face. The silence of the compound felt heavier than usual. Mito, Tobirama, even Madara. They were all gone, scattered to the winds of the Pure Land, leaving him behind like a single stubborn leaf clinging to an autumn branch. All that remained of them was this village, his dream made manifest in stone and will. Aji-sama! The sliding door was thrown open with characteristic force, shattering his melancholy. Tsunade stood there, vibrant and loud, a whirlwind of energy in the quiet house. Minato is here to see you. Hashirama blinked, the ghosts of the past receding as he looked at her. And then there was Tsunade, his last tether to the family he had lost, the living spark of his brother and wife. He set the cup down gently on the tatami mat. Let him in, Tsuna. Minati stepped into the room, dropping to a knee. Hashirama-sama, Minato intoned, his head bowed low in reverence. Hashirama laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck as a bead of sweat formed on his brow. Oh, come now. At ease, Minato. You make me feel ancient when you're this stiff. Minato didn't smile. He rose, but his posture remained rigid, his blue eyes dark with the weight of his news. Lord First, forgive the intrusion without notice, but this is a matter of utmost urgency. The playfulness vanished from Hashirama's face in an instant. He sat up straighter, the aura of the god of shinobi suddenly filling the small room, sharp and attentive. What is it, Minato? It is about my son, Minato stated, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. Naruto. Hashirama raised a single eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. The boy who graduated at 5? What about him? I believe, Minato said slowly, that this is something you must see with your own eyes, Hashirama-sama. To think I outlived them all. Perhaps this was the reason why, Hashirama murmured, his gaze fixed on the small redhead meditating in the center of the garden. He was always special, Kushina whispered, moving to stand beside the first. Her voice trembled, a fragile mix of maternal pride and deep-seated worry. But I never imagined it would be this. I always had my suspicions, Minato added, his analytical mind still processing the magnitude of it. As you know, Lord First, Kushina's seal never weakened during the birth, not even for a second. Now I understand why. His chakra suppressed the nine tails. Hashirama finished the thought, the realization settling heavily in the room. He turned from the window, his dark eyes locking onto the young parents with absolute authority. Minato, Kushina, listen closely. Young Naruto will not be assigned to a Jonin team. I will speak with Sarutobi. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. From this day forward, he will be under my direct and full care. The color drained from both parents' faces, shock rendering them momentous silent. Be but Hashirama-sama, Kushina finally stammered, her maternal instinct flaring. There is no room for argument, Hashirama cut in. His tone wasn't harsh, but it was absolute. I must teach him everything I know. My time in this world is borrowed. And if the heavens kept me here this long, it must be for him. I cannot waste a single second. He adjusted his robes, his gaze shifting back to the garden with renewed purpose. I will go to him now. Leaving the stunned parents in his wake, the first Hokage stepped out to meet the future. Naruto's brow furrowed in concentration, but his mind refused to settle into the meditative void. He wasn't a fool. He had felt the shift in the air the moment the chakra paper had reacted yesterday. Water and earth. It wasn't an impossible combination. Rare, perhaps, but not alarming. Did Tusan expect wind? Naruto wondered, the question nagging at him. He's a wind specialist, but simple disappointment doesn't cause a shinobi of his caliber to freeze like that. Naruto. The voice was deep, unfamiliar, and held so much power. Naruto snapped his head around. His eyes widened, landing on the figure standing at the edge of the garden. The statues in the village didn't do him justice. This was the man who had built the shinobi world they lived in. Lord first. Naruto scrambled to his feet, his body moving on instinct. He bowed deeply, his shock instantly replaced by the disciplined steel of a trained shinobi. I am honored, sir. Hashirama chuckled, a warm, earthy sound. At ease, child. I see you were meditating. I didn't mean to interrupt. Yes, Lord first. Naruto straightened, though he kept his posture respectful. Your father came to me, Hashirama said, walking closer, his wooden sandals clicking softly against the stone path. He had some suspicions regarding your growth. I'm here to verify them. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, his sharp mind connecting the dots. He was rattled after he checked my elemental affinities, he stated, testing the waters. Am I right? Hashirama blinked, staring at the boy for a second before throwing his head back in a boisterous laugh. Ha! You're certainly sharper than I was at your age, that's for sure. Naruto stared at the laughing legend, a single bead of sweat sliding down his temple. Is this really the god of shinobi? As quickly as the laughter came, it vanished. Hashirama cleared his throat, and the atmosphere in the garden suddenly grew heavy, the air thick with power. Sit, Naruto, Hashirama said, his voice dropping an octave. I will explain everything. Hiruzen let out a long, weary puff of smoke, his eyes scanning the endless mountain of paperwork on his desk. The village was at peace, but the administration was a war of its own. Sarutobi! The double doors to the office exploded open, slamming against the walls with a violence that nearly rattled the third Hokage out of his chair. Hashirama-sama, Hiruzen gasped, clutching his chest. Please, the door has hinges for a reason. Shut up and listen, Hashirama barked, marching up to the desk with a manic grin. Naruto stays with me. He will not be assigned to a genin team, and he will have no jonin instructor. He operates solo under my direct supervision until I say otherwise. Hiruzen stared at the first Hokage, completely dumbfounded. He set his pipe down slowly. Naruto, Minato's son? Why does a fresh graduate concern you? Hashirama leaned over the desk, his eyes sparkling. The boy has would release. Hiruzen's jaw unhinged. What? Right? Can you imagine it? Hashirama threw his hands up, laughing boisterously. Finally, someone with my bloodline, and from Mito's clan no less. Ashina would have been so proud of this. Hiruzen blinked, his shock momentarily replaced by confusion. Who? Uzumaki Ashina? Hashirama paused, looking at Sarutobi expectantly. The clan head? My contemporary. Hiruzen searched his memory for a moment before shaking his head. Never heard of him. Hashirama's shoulders slumped immediately. Oh! The dinner table was quiet. Usually, Naruto's silence was a staple of the household, a calm center in their daily storm. But tonight, the silence felt heavy because Jiraiya was there, and wherever the Toad Sage went, noise usually followed. Just a year ago, I was training a boy with the Rinnegan, Jiraiya said suddenly, his gaze fixed on Naruto. After that, I thought I'd seen it all. Nothing is impossible to me anymore. Naruto looked up from his bowl. What was he like? A redhead. Like you, Jiraiya noted, a nostalgic smile touching his lips. But he never had the first Hokage as a master. He just had the simple, gallant Jiraiya. He ended with a hearty laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Naruto set his chopsticks down, his expression conflicted. I always expected to be your student, Jiraiya-sensei. But Hashirama-sama, he's different. He acts a bit silly, but standing next to him, I could feel it, the sheer power rolling off him. This is for the best, Naruto, Jiraiya said, reaching over to clap a heavy, reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Besides, who said I won't still teach you? You can still have 2 masters. Minato nodded in agreement. Sensei is right. Hashirama-sama is a man who suffered greatly for the peace we live in today. If anyone has the right to train his heir, it is him. Kushina, however, seemed focused on a different detail. She tapped her chin thoughtfully, her eyes narrowing with a distinctly feminine intensity. Not to mention, the man is 70 years old but looks like he's in his late 40s, she muttered. That must be a phenomenal skin routine. All right, Naruto, Hashirama declared excitedly, slapping his knees as he stood before the redhead. I've never actually had a student of my own before, so we're going to be figuring this out as we go. Naruto blinked, tilting his head. I thought the third was your student, Hashirama-sama. Hashirama waved a hand dismissively. Nah, Sarutobi was Tobirama's headache. I just taught him a trick or 2 on the side. He grinned broad and bright. And dropped the sama. Call me Hashirama-sensei. Naruto looked hesitant for a moment, the weight of the title feeling strange on his tongue, but he nodded firmly. Hi, Hashirama-sensei. All right, here is how it works. First, focus your chakra into both hands. Earth nature in one, water in the other. Don't just hold them. Knead them until they become one source of life. Hashirama explained, his hands flowing into the snake seal. Like this. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth groaned. A massive tree burst from the soil, spiraling upward and shaking the entire training ground of the Senju compound with the force of its growth. Whoa! Naruto breathed, his blue eyes wide as the shadow of the Titan fell over him. Now you go, Hashirama cheered. Naruto nodded, his expression sharpening into focus. He closed his eyes, centering himself. Earth, water, combine. He took a deep breath and slammed his palms together, mimicking the snake seal perfectly. The ground shuddered, not a quake like Hashirama's, but a heavy vibration. Crack. Soil flew into the air as a tree shot up, twisting and locking into place. It was shorter than Hashirama's ancient oak, but it was thick, sturdy, and undeniably alive. I can't believe it. Naruto stared at his hands, then at the tree. I did it. Naruto, you got it on the first try. Hashirama was practically vibrating with joy. You truly are a prodigy. What on earth is going on here? The roar cut through the celebration like a blade. Tsunade stomped onto the training field, her eyes blazing. The whole compound was shaking. I thought the Ninetales was loose. She stopped, blinking as she spotted the redhead. Naruto, what is Minato and Kushina's brat doing here? Suna, Hashirama pointed excitedly at the fresh wood. Look, Naruto, show Tsuna what you just did. 2 years later. As time passed, Naruto came to a realization. His sensei might have been a goofball who laughed too loud and gambled too much, but when the moment called for it, he was terrifyingly absolute. There were flashes of the Senju Hashirama, moments of gravity that reminded everyone why his name shook the whole ninja world. These scrolls contain the sum of my knowledge, noted down throughout my life, Hashirama said, his voice quiet as he unfurled a heavy, ancient-looking parchment. Tobirama added his own findings in the margins. He was always the intelligent one between us. Naruto offered a small, knowing smile. You are no fool, sensei. You just love to boast about your little brother, calling him a genius so no one forgets him. Hashirama chuckled, a soft, melancholy sound. I guess you saw right through me. He ran a finger over the ink, tracing his brother's sharp, precise handwriting. He died 15 years ago, but I still miss him every day. He was a stoic man, hard as stone to the outside world, but always so gentle on the inside. I never had siblings, Naruto murmured, looking down at his hands. I don't know how that feels. You will, Hashirama reassured him with a warm grin. Minato and Kushina are still young. Give them time. He tapped a specific section of the scroll, changing the subject. This is the methodology for my sage mode. I created it from scratch. Unlike young Jiraiya, who was taught by the toads of Mount Myaboku, or the snakes of Ryuchi. Wow, Naruto muttered, his eyes widening as he looked at the complex diagrams. The sheer scale of chakra control required was dizzying. Maybe when you are a bit older. Your body isn't ready for that kind of nature energy yet, Hashirama mused, rolling the scroll back up. Speaking of readiness, how is the Laughing Buddha jutsu going? Naruto's sweat dropped, his enthusiasm deflating instantly. I mastered it, but sensei, can't we adjust the name? Laughing Buddha sounds really silly. No, Hashirama barked, his face dead serious. Naruto just sighed, his shoulders slumping. Hi, sensei. Keeping a shinobi like Naruto who possessed would release locked inside the village is strategic suicide, Danzo barked, slamming his fist on table. We should be displaying Konoha's power to the other nations, not hiding it in the Senju compound. He was even forbid to use with style in the Chunin exams he won. Hiruzen exhaled a long, weary plume of smoke, rubbing his temples as he looked at his old rival. Danzo, for the last time, this is not a council decision. This is Lord First's direct order. Hiruzen is right. Danzo, Hamura interjected calmly, adjusting her glasses. We cannot argue with Hashirama-sama. He founded this village. His authority supersedes ours. Danzo's visible eye narrowed, his frustration palpable. And how long will this order stand? Until the boy is an old man? While IWA and Kumo deploying their forces, we let our strongest asset play gardener. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair, a small, challenging smirk playing on his lips as he gestured toward the door. Why don't you go ask him yourself? The wind atop the Hokage monument was cold, carrying the scent of rain and the distant, metallic tang of iron. Hashirama stood on the edge of his own stone likeness, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. I dreamed of peace, Hashirama whispered, his voice carried away by the gale. I founded this system to stop children from dying in ditches. I caught the tailed beasts and distributed them among the nations. I thought a balance of power would force hands to unclench. He closed his eyes, pain etching deep lines into his face. All of that, and yet, peace was never truly achieved. They say the war has already begun in the borders, Naruto murmured, stepping up beside his sensei. He didn't look like a boy anymore. The training had sharpened him. The tension is snapping. Soon enough, I will be deployed. I know how the higher-ups think. We must show prowess. Everything I have done, was it for nothing? Hashirama asked the empty air, his shoulders slumping under the weight of history. It feels like just yesterday I was standing on this very cliff. With Madara. Naruto's eyes widened. It was the first time he had ever heard his sensei speak that name aloud. Uchiha Madara, the Uchiha leader. Madara, Naruto echoed softly. Yeah. Hashirama let out a dry, humorless chuckle. He was the one who named this village, Kanahagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. He looked down at the village lights flickering on, one by one. In the end, I killed him to protect the village. I killed my best friend, just to live long enough to witness war after war. No matter the era, there is always a fight. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Naruto stood there, trying to reconcile the monster from the history books with the man who named their home. Go home, Naruto, Hashirama said finally, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. I want to stay here a little longer. Hi, sensei. Naruto bowed to the broad back of his master and turned to leave. The wind howled across the stone faces, tugging at his flak jacket as he began to walk away. He had taken only a few steps when the deep voice cut through the gale. Naruto. He stopped, freezing in place before looking back over his shoulder. Sensei? Hashirama didn't turn. He stood like a statue, silhouetted against the dying light of the setting sun. If anything happens to me, protect this village. Place it above your life, above your heart. And always do the right thing. Naruto stared at the man who had built their world. He straightened his posture, his expression hardening into a solemn vow. I will, Naruto promised, his voice steady against the wind, because doing what is right is always the right thing. Sensei is depressed, Naruto muttered, staring into the flickering flames of the hearth. He looked up, his blue eyes serious. I mean, really depressed. It's not like when he loses at gambling. It's heavy. He sat on the floor rug beside his father, watching his mother's nimble fingers work a needle through the fabric of a blue blouse. I can't blame him, Minato said softly, not looking up from the book in his lap. To live as long as he has, only to see war after war. He turned a page, the sound crisp in the quiet room. Tomorrow you are coming with me, Naruto. You'll meet my new genin team. All right, Tusan. Kushina sighed, the sound trembling slightly as she bit off a thread. She smoothed the blue fabric of Minato's undershirt, her hands lingering on the material. So it really is war. She looked from her husband to her son, her eyes glistening. And now I must send both of you out there. Don't worry, Ka-san. Naruto grinned. Tusan is the yellow flash. And well, me is me. Minato chuckled, the sound warm and grounding. He reached out to ruffle Naruto's red hair. Well, as optimistic as that logic is, Naruto is right. We will be fine, Kushina. Kushina managed a small, brave smile, though her grip on the uniform tightened. I hope so. Team, listen up. Minato gestured to the redhead standing beside him. This is my son, Naruto. Naruto stepped forward, adjusting the green flak jacket that marked his rank as a chunin, a stark contrast to the fresh genin status of two of the team members. Pleased to meet you, Naruto said, offering a short, polite bow. His bright blue eyes locked onto the silver-haired boy instantly. You must be Hatake Kakashi. I've heard a lot about you. Kakashi gave a curt, respectful nod. Hello. Naruto smiled at the masked prodigy before shifting his gaze to the other two. His smile faltered slightly into genuine, blunt confusion. I don't know who you two are. A visible vein throbbed on the boy with the goggles' forehead. The girl stepped in quickly, smiling sheepishly to diffuse the tension. Noera Rin. It's nice to meet you, Naruto-kun. And I am Uchiha Obito. The boy pointed a thumb at his chest, striking a dramatic pose. The future Hokage. Whoa, that's my dream too. Naruto beamed, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture that was identical to his father's. But I think we'll both have to compete with my dad first, you know? Yeah, well, I'm not gonna lose, Obito declared passionately, shaking a fist at the redhead. Not to you and not to Sensei. While it's refreshing to see such passion, Minato interjected, his voice cutting through the banter. He placed a hand on Obito's shoulder, his expression shifting from amusement to the steel of a wartime commander. We don't have time for this right now. We must meet with Lord Third immediately. The playful atmosphere evaporated instantly. Three heads nodded in unison, their postures snapping into rigid attention. Hi, Sensei. Nice guys, Naruto thought with a smile. Hiruzen waited until the heavy oak door clicked shut behind Kakashi, Obito, and Rin before turning his gaze to the father and son remaining in the room. Naruto, Hiruzen began, his voice dropping to a confidential timbre. I have consulted with Hashirama-sama and Minato regarding your deployment. On this mission, you are to use wood release. The third Hokage leaned back, interlacing his fingers, looking weary. It weighs heavily on me to ask this of a 7-year-old, to make you a target so soon. But with the tensions rising, we must display Konoha's true power to the other nations. We must remind them of the legacy we hold. Naruto didn't flinch. He adjusted his stance, looking every bit the soldier despite his size. I shall serve the village in whatever way keeps it safe, Sandaime-sama. Hiruzen nodded, a flicker of pride in his tired eyes. I know you will. He shifted his gaze to the blonde Jonin. Minato, led them well. Good luck. Father and son straightened simultaneously, snapping into a crisp bow. Hi! Outskirts of Land of Fire. It really is impressive, isn't it? Rin chirped, adjusting her medical pouch as they walked. She looked between the silver-haired prodigy and the redhead who looked like a miniature version of their sensei. Both you and Kakashi are already chunin at such a young age. Naruto scratched his cheek, smiling at the praise. Thanks, Rin. He turned his bright blue eyes toward the Uchiha walking beside him. Hey, Obito? What? Obito grunted, adjusting his goggles. Can I see your Sharingan? I've heard the Uchiha clan is amazing. A sharp, dismissive scoff cut through the air before Obito could answer. Kakashi didn't even look back, but the sound was enough. Obito's face flushed a deep crimson, his fists clenching at his sides. Even Rin had to hide a small, awkward giggle behind her hand. I haven't awakened it yet, Obito stammered, looking down at his feet. Oh, Naruto blinked, realizing his mistake, but quickly grinned, slapping Obito on the back. Well, don't worry about it. You're an Uchiha, right? You'll get those eyes eventually. Obito's posture straightened, the humiliation fading into a grateful grin. You know, you're a really nice guy, Naruto. Unlike a certain gray-haired, mask-wearing jerk I know. HN. Whatever, Kakashi muttered, bored. Naruto chuckled sheepishly at the dynamic, but the laughter died down as Minato stopped abruptly in front of them. The playful atmosphere vanished instantly. All right, team, listen up, Minato said, his voice dropping into professional seriousness. From this point, we split up. I will proceed solo to draw the enemy's attention. He looked at his son and his student, his gaze sharp. Kakashi, Naruto, you two will lead the team to the rendezvous point. Stay sharp and stay safe. Naruto's brow furrowed as the forest around them seemed to darken, not from clouds, but from the sheer wall of bodies blocking out the sun. 50 Cloud Shinobi, a full platoon. There are too many of them. Obito stammered, his goggles fogging up with panic as he backed away. This is bad. We have to retreat, Kakashi barked, his hand already reaching for a smoke bomb. Formation B, move. Wait, Kakashi. Naruto's voice was calm, cutting through the rising panic like a blade. He didn't move, his blue eyes scanning the enemy line. We can't outrun them. Not 50. They'll just pick us off from the trees. Listen to the redhead, brats. The Kumo captain sneered, stepping forward with his blade drawn. He signaled his men, the metal of 50 headbands glinting in the dappled light. Surrender the girl or die here. Naruto ignored him. He ignored his team's ragged breathing. He simply stepped forward, bringing his hands together into a single, heavy seal. Tiger. The air suddenly changed. It grew heavy, dense, and suffocating, pressing down on the lungs of every shinobi in the clearing. The ground beneath their feet groaned, a deep, resonant vibration that rattled teeth. What is this chakra? Kakashi thought, his eye widening as he felt the sheer pressure radiating from the redhead. It wasn't the sharp, stinging chakra of a prodigy. It was vast and terrifyingly alive. Humph! Naruto exhaled a short, sharp breath. Crack. What is wrong with this kid? The Kumo captain roared, sensing the shift in the earth. Attack! Kill them all now! It was too late. Naruto's fingers shifted, locking the final seal. Snake. Mokuton, Jukai Kuton, would release deep forest emergence. The ground exploded. It wasn't just trees growing. It was a tidal wave of timber. Roots as thick as houses erupted from the soil, twisting and lashing out like angered serpents. The Kumo shinobi didn't stand a chance. Their battle cries turned into screams of terror as the forest swallowed them whole, binding them, crushing them, and burying them beneath a canopy that hadn't existed seconds ago. The roar of the earth was deafening, shaking the very foundation of the land, and then, just as quickly as it had begun, silence fell. 50 men, gone, replaced by a dense, impassable jungle. Naruto narrowed his eyes, catching sight of a single shadow flickering away through the distant branches. One escaped, he noted, lowering his hands. Good. Someone has to tell the Raikage what happened here. He exhaled slowly, the oppressive aura vanishing, and turned back to his team. They were staring at him, not with relief, but with absolute, unadulterated reverence. And Naruto, Rin breathed, her hands covering her mouth. That was... Would release, Kakashi finished, his voice hollow. He stared at the twisted roots, realizing the legends of the first Hokage weren't just stories. Why you? Obito broke the silence, launching himself forward and grabbing the redhead by the shoulders. You are amazing. Naruto blinked as he was shaken back and forth, a small, sheepish chuckle escaping his lips. I should probably get used to this, he thought, scratching the back of his head. Then Naruto just stood there. The earth started cracking, and then, bam, a whole King jungle appeared out of nowhere. Obito waved his arms wildly, trying to encompass the sheer scale of the destruction to his teacher. Rin drove a sharp elbow into his ribs. Obito! Language! Ow! Right, sorry. Obito yelped, rubbing his side, though his grin didn't falter. He looked at Naruto like he was a shiny new kunai. But seriously, sensei, trees. Everywhere. Naruto stood nearby, his face burning a bright crimson. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring intently at his sandals, clearly unused to being the center of such explosive praise. Minato chuckled, the sound warm and grounding amidst the excitement. He looked at his son, his blue eyes softening with a mixture of amusement and unparalleled pride. Well, Minato said, placing a hand on Naruto's head. He is certainly terrifying when he gets serious. Jiraiya-sensei considers him his student, Minato thought, watching the way the sunlight caught the red in his son's hair, so similar to Kushina yet carrying the weight of the first. Could it be? Is he the one? 1 week later. I can't believe I'm dying while the brat is outside the village, Hashirama thought with a surge of genuine annoyance. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that shook his frail frame against the futon. It had been a week since Naruto left, and his own strength was fading faster than the setting sun. Grandfather! The shoji screen slammed open, nearly flying off its tracks. Tsunade burst into the room, grinning like she'd just won the lottery, clutching an orange book in her hand. What is it, Tsuna? He wheezed, trying to sit up. You have to see this, Tsunade exclaimed, shoving the book into his trembling hands. Page 28. The new international edition just dropped. Hashirama raised a skeptical eyebrow but complied, his fingers fumbling with the pages until he reached the marked spot. He gasped. Bingo book entry. Konohagakure. Name, Namikaze Naruto. Age 7. Appearance. Red hair, small stature. Rank, S-Class, Flea on sight. Moniker, the Boy Wonder. Abilities, confirmed user of the Wood Release Kekkei Genkai. Incident report, single-handedly incapacitated a platoon of 50 Kumojonin within seconds. Current status: extremely dangerous. Ha! Hashirama let out a boisterous laugh that immediately turned into a coughing fit, but his smile was blinding, erasing the years from his face. He slapped the book with pride. That is my heir. I can't believe it. Kushina stared at the page, her violet eyes wide enough to swallow the world. She sat on the engawa, the tea beside her having long gone cold, clutching the orange book like a lifeline. Do you see this, Makoto? Do you actually see this? Beside her, the usually unflappable Uchiha matriarch looked as if she had been hit with a genjutsu. Makoto nodded slowly, her gaze glued to the red S stamped next to the boy's picture, unable to process the text. You never told me, Makoto whispered, finally finding her voice. Kushina, you never told me he could do that. I didn't know, Kushina exclaimed, her face flushing a deep, proud red that matched her hair. She looked ready to detonate with sheer joy. I knew he was talented. I knew Hashirama-sama training him. But this good. He's 7, Makoto. This is my son. Deep within the seal that bound Uzumaki Kushina, a massive shadow stirred in the darkness. The nine-tails groaned, the sound vibrating through the endless water of its cage like distant thunder. It wasn't just annoyance that caused the great beast to shift uneasily. Beneath the hatred, there was a flicker of something else, a memory of wood and suppression, of a power that turned bijou into pets, that it had hoped never to feel again. The giant red eyes narrowed, glowing in the dark. This freaking kid. Well, Jiraiya? Orochimaru purred, his voice smooth and laced with that characteristic, polite malice. It appears your golden boy Minato has been eclipsed, and by his own 7-year-old son, no less. The snake Sannin stared at the open bingo book, his golden eyes narrowing as he traced the S-rank designation. I must admit, this is terrifying, to think a mere child commands such power. A cold shiver crawled down Orochimaru's spine, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. It was absurd, really, to feel a flicker of primal fear from a photograph and a few lines of text. Yet, the implications of wood release were not lost on him. Jiraiya didn't rise to the bait. He simply took a swig from his sake cup, a soft, proud smile spreading across his face as he looked at the red-haired boy in the photo. Way to go, Naruto. Naruto let out a heavy sigh as the sprawling Senju estate came into view. It wasn't just a compound. It was a monument to history, a place where the village's heart had first started beating. The walk here had been exhausting. Since his return, the village had looked at him differently. There were reverent bows from civilians, whispers of the boy wonder, and awestruck congratulations from shinobi twice his age. It was too much. Even his mother's hug earlier, a bone-crushing embrace of relief and pride, had felt suffocating because of the dread settling in his gut. As he reached the main gate, he stopped. Tsunade was standing there, leaning against the timber frame. She wasn't wearing her usual confident smirk. Her expression was melancholy, her eyes red-rimmed. Welcome home, boy wonder, she muttered, the nickname sounding heavy on her tongue. She pulled him into a brief, tight hug, burying her face in his shoulder for a fleeting second. Naruto hugged her back, but his frown deepened as she pulled away. Tsunade, what is it? She didn't meet his eyes. She just gestured toward the main house. He is waiting for you. Naruto's breath hitched. The implication hung in the air like a guillotine blade. He walked to the master bedroom, his steps feeling leaden. His hand trembled as he reached for the sliding door, the wood cool against his sweating palm. Taking a shaky breath, he slid it open. He almost gasped. The god of shinobi, the man who tamed tailed beasts and built villages, looked small. Hashirama lay beneath heavy quilts, his skin pale and papery. A wet, rattling cough shook his frame as the fresh air hit him. Oh, The boy wonder returns. Hashirama wheezed, managing a weak, lopsided grin. Come here, kid. Naruto forced a smile onto his face, fighting the sting in his eyes as he approached the futon and sat on his knees. Sensei. Thank the stars you came early, Hashirama whispered, his voice barely a rasp. Dying before seeing you one last time. That would have been bad form. What are you talking about? Naruto's voice cracked, the denial rising in his throat. You're Hashirama Senju. You're not going to. Naruto. The tone was soft but absolute. Hashirama reached out, his hand trembling as he rested it on Naruto's knee. This is enough for me. I have already lived too long. He saw the tears welling up in his student's blue eyes and shook his head gently. Please, do not cry. Crying for an old geezer like me, while our young shinobi are dying out there on the battlefield. It feels humiliating. Yes, sir, Naruto choked out, wiping his eyes furiously with his sleeve. He straightened his back, trying to be the soldier his sensei needed him to be. Hashirama gazed up at the ceiling, his eyes losing focus as he drifted into memory. Still, I always believed I would die on the battlefield, clashing with titans, reshaping the map, but dying like this, in a warm bed. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Ha! Madara must be laughing at me right now. The great Hashirama, passing away in his sleep. His expression softened, a profound peace settling over his features. But maybe now I can finally see him again. And this time, maybe we won't have to fight. Sensei, Naruto cried out, unable to hold it back anymore, grabbing Hashirama's hand with both of his. Hashirama's grip tightened, a final surge of the strength that had once held the world together, before slowly, gently relaxing. Good luck, Naruto. Hashirama breathed, his eyes sliding shut, a faint smile gracing his lips. My dreams, I entrust them all to you. Thinking back then, what were Sensei's dreams after living so long? The peace of world, or just protect his village? Naruto told his companion as he stared at the Hokage momentum. Chapter 2. Boy Wonder. It feels unreal, Naruto murmured, standing before the fresh grave. The stone was cold, the earth still overturned. To think he is really gone. Minato placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder, his presence a warm anchor against the grief. This is the cycle of life, Naruto. It is a heavy lesson, but one day, you will understand. Tsunade nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on her grandfather's name carved into the granite. She reached out, squeezing Naruto's other shoulder. You gave him a spark in his final days, Naruto, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Watching you, teaching you, I think he felt like he was back in the old times. You made him feel alive again. Naruto managed a small, sad smile, his gaze never leaving the grave. I only tried to be worthy of him. The death of the first Hokage struck Konoha like a bolt of lightning. Even though he had been retired for decades, his mere presence had been a silent pillar of comfort for the village. A living monument that was now gone, leaving the leaf feeling a little colder, a little more vulnerable. Naruto, I'm so sorry. We just heard, Rin said softly, her eyes filled with genuine sympathy. Naruto managed a strained smile, waving off her concern gently. It's fine, Rin. Hashirama-sama wouldn't want us brooding around his grave. We have a war to fight, after all. Naruto is right. Obito clenched his fist, fire burning in his eyes. Now it's our turn. It is our duty to protect the village in his place. If the village is under your care, we are truly doomed, Kakashi stated blankly, not even looking up. What did you say, Kakashi? Watching the familiar chaotic bickering, both Rin and Naruto let out a small, relieved chuckle. Life, despite the grief, went on. 1 year later, 8-year-old Naruto. That golden hair, that teleportation jutsu. Akumo Jonin stumbled back, his voice trembling as he recognized the silhouette. It's the yellow flash. We have to retreat, or we're all dead. Stand your ground, cowards. A massive figure stepped forward, lightning chakra exploding around his body like a living storm, crackling with the deafening sound of 1,000 birds. The future Raikage grinned savagely as his eyes locked onto the redhead. Look closer. The boy wonder is here too. Roared, his muscles tensing. If we kill these two, we don't just win a battle, we end the war right here. Naruto scoffed, standing casually beside his father despite the crushing killing intent washing over them. You uncultured brutes really think you have a chance? Tusan alone is enough to handle the likes of you. Minato didn't boast. He simply pulled a handful of his signature tri-pronged kunai from his pouch, the metal glinting in the sun. Naruto, stay back. Minato ordered calmly, his voice a sharp contrast to the thundering lightning. He threw the blades, scattering them across the battlefield in a seemingly random pattern. I've got this. Flash. In the blink of an eye, Minato was gone. Naruto smirked as he watched the scene unfold in slow motion. Attacked empty air, his lightning-clad fist hitting nothing but the afterimage. Minato had already materialized above him, a Rasengan swirling violently in his hand, poised to drive it into the future Raikage's exposed back. It's over, Naruto thought. But then his blue eyes widened. From behind the strange, rapping shinobi wearing sunglasses, a massive, fleshy tentacle erupted with terrifying speed. It whipped out, intercepting Minato's attack and forcing the yellow flash to teleport away to avoid being crushed. That chakra, Naruto muttered, sensing the dense, malicious energy. Hachibi. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing whistle cut through the chaotic noise of the battlefield. Naruto's head snapped toward the sound. Tusan, that's the signal. We have to pull back. Minato reappeared next to one of his kunai, sliding to a halt. He narrowed his eyes at the Jinchuriki and his brother, calculating the odds in a split second. You go, Naruto, Minato commanded, not taking his eyes off the enemy. I will follow. 9-year-old Naruto. The rain fell in sheets, a relentless, gray curtain that soaked the world to the bone. These specific features, the red hair, the chakra signature, Konan murmured, her amber eyes wide as she peered through the downpour. I can't believe it. The boy wonder is actually real. Yeah. A young voice cut through the sound of the rain, sounding amused. Whoever said I wasn't? Konoha's boy wonder. Halt right there and state your business. A boy with spiky orange hair, cloaked in black fabric adorned with red clouds, stepped out from the mist. He stood with an authority that betrayed his age, flanking 2 others. Naruto skid to a stop, his sandals splashing in the mud. He looked at the leader, then at the girl with the paper flower, but his gaze froze on the third figure. The redhead, the eyes. Ripple patterns, purple. Naruto's breath hitched. Those eyes. The Rinnegan? Wait a minute. He pointed an accusatory finger at them, his blue eyes wide. You guys are the orphans Jiraiya-sensei wouldn't shut up about. The tension in the air shattered instantly. The 3 AIM ninja blinked in unison. The hostility drained from the orange-haired leader's face, replaced by a wide, beaming grin. You know Jiraiya-sensei? Yahiko exclaimed, stepping closer, completely forgetting his guard. Yeah, Naruto grinned back, wiping rain from his forehead. He was my dad's sensei, the yellow flash, and he taught me a thing or two as well. He told me about the 3 kids he trained in the rain. Whoa, that is so cool. So we're like, grand students? Brothers. Yahiko laughed, slapping his knee. Small world. Behind him, Konan sighed, a visible sweat drop sliding down her temple despite the rain. Nagato offered a sheepish, quiet chuckle. Yahiko, Nagato murmured softly, I think you should be a bit more serious. That is the boy wonder standing there. He is an S-rank shinobi. Oh, right. Cough. Yahiko straightened up, trying to compose his face back into the stoic mask of a leader. I mean, yes, it is good to meet a student of sensei, but… His expression hardened, the smile vanishing. We cannot allow you to bring your war here. Amigakure is no longer a battlefield for the great nations to trample on. We are taking our country back. Naruto blinked, looking around at the desolate landscape. Well, that sucks. My mission parameters are pretty specific about this sector. Where am I supposed to fight? Yahiko crossed his arms, his purple-eyed friend stepping up beside him ominously. Get out of our land. Go fight in your own backyard. Naruto tapped his chin, a mischievous glint in his eyes. How about you make me leave? I can't exactly explain to the Sandaime that I abandoned my post just because someone asked nicely. He grinned, the excitement of a challenge bubbling up within him. But don't worry, I won't kill you. Jiraiya-sensei would never let me hear the end of it if I hurt his students. You arrogant little brat. Yahiko snapped, his hand reaching for the hilt of his blade. Boy wonder, Nagato began, stepping forward with a warning tone. I don't think this is a wise choice. He cut himself off. The air suddenly grew heavy, vibrating with a density that made it hard to breathe. The rain seemed to slow down around the small Konohinin. This chakra, Konan thought, sweat mingling with the rain on her face as she took an instinctive step back. It's dense. It feels even more vast than Nagato's. Naruto clapped his hands together, the sound cracking like a whip. Would release, deep forest bloom. The earth roared. Massive roots tore through the muddy ground, twisting and rising into a gargantuan forest in seconds. The landscape was terraformed in the blink of an eye, and atop the twisting branches, enormous red flowers burst open. Holy sh**t! Yahiko yelped, stumbling back. Nothing could have prepared him for this scale. Nagato raised his hand, chakra gathering for a Shinra Tensei to repel the encroaching wood, but he froze. A thick, yellow mist was descending rapidly from the giant flowers. Pollen? Konan! Yahiko! Don't breathe! Nagato gasped, but it was too late. He watched his friends collapse mid-step. His own vision swam, his knees buckling under the weight of the potent neurotoxin. Darkness took him. Silence fell over the rain-soaked clearing. Crap, Naruto muttered, the blue fading from his eyes as he looked at the three unconscious bodies. I totally overdid it. He slammed his palm onto the ground, commanding the trees to retract, sinking the massive forest back into the earth as if it had never existed. A few minutes later, the three AIM orphans groaned, pushing themselves up from the mud, heads spinning and limbs heavy. Man, I really wanted to see what those eyes could do, but I guess I got carried away, Naruto said, standing over them with a sheepish grin, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, I'm out. He turned to leave, waving a hand lazily. Wait! Yahiko shouted, struggling to stand, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're just leaving. You won. You could have killed us. Why didn't you? Naruto paused, looking back over his shoulder. His blue eyes were serious, lacking the malice of a killer. I don't go around killing people just because I can, he stated simply. With that, he flickered away, vanishing into the gray curtain of rain. Yahiko stared at the empty spot, then looked at his red-haired brother. Sorry, Nagato, but that kid is infinitely cooler than you. Nagato just nodded dumbly, still terrifyingly aware of how close they had come to death. Unknown to Naruto, sparing them today would be the greatest mistake of his life. I can't believe it. You actually met them? How are they? Yahiko, Nagato, Konan, Jiraiya exclaimed, beaming so hard he nearly knocked over his sake cup. Tell me everything. Naruto chuckled, poking at his grilled fish. They were cool, sensei. Especially Yahiko, he seemed like a genuinely good guy. A bit loud, kind of like you, but a leader also like you. And you really defeated them? With a single jutsu? Jiraiya pressed, his eyes wide. Yeah. Naruto scratched his cheek with his chopsticks. Though, to be fair, calling Deep Forest Bloom just a jutsu feels like an understatement. It's more of a force of nature. Damn. Jiraiya breathed out, a nervous chuckle escaping him as he pictured the devastation. You know, I'm really glad you're on our side, kid. Imagine having to face you and Minato on the battlefield. Geez, I'd just surrender. Minato sweat dropped, serving himself more rice. Sensei, can you stop inventing nightmare scenarios in your head and just eat your dinner? The food is getting cold. My son. Defeating a Rinnegan user before he even hits puberty. Kushina sniffed loudly, wiping a dramatic, fake tear from her eye. She grabbed Naruto's head and pulled him into a headlock of affection. I'm so proud. That's my boy. He's my student too, you know? Jiraiya interjected loudly, pointing a chopstick at the redhead to stake his claim. Which reminds me, pack your gear, Naruto. You're coming on a mission with us tomorrow. Us? Naruto wheezed, finally managing to pry himself loose from his mother's suffocating, affectionate headlock. He rubbed his neck, looking confused. You mean with Dad? No, kid. Jiraiya grinned, his chest puffing out with theatrical pride as he slammed his sake cup down. I mean us, the legendary Sannin. The Sandaime has been talking to me lately, Minato said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. He looked at the redhead, seeing not just his son, but strangely enough, his best friend. He is thinking about passing the hat to me. Naruto's blue eyes widened, a genuine, beaming smile breaking across his face. That is wonderful, Tusan. After everything you've done, you deserve this. It's your right. Yeah. Minato exhaled, his expression softening into something profoundly serious. He reached out, placing a firm hand on Naruto's shoulder. But listen to me, Naruto. Keep this clearly in your mind. He squeezed gently. No matter what title I hold, or what I achieve out there, you will always be my greatest achievement. Minato leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper of absolute conviction. You are the village itself, Naruto. The legendary Sannin, the White Fang, even the Yellow Flash. We all have our shadows. We can all be stained by this world. But the boy wonder. He smiled, a mixture of hope and melancholy. He must always be Konoha's face, the beacon itself. Naruto stared at his father, the weight of the words settling over him like a heavy cloak. He felt a sudden lump in his throat, not from sadness, but from the sheer, crushing magnitude of his father's love and expectation. He saw the fatigue in Minato's eyes, the stains of war he was trying so desperately to keep off his son. He swallowed hard, his blue eyes burning with a fierce, new resolve. He didn't offer a childish grin or a joke this time. Instead, he placed his own hand over his father's. I will, Naruto promised, his voice steady. I'll be the fire that doesn't extinguish. How nice to finally share a mission with you, Naruto-kun. Naruto had never truly hated anyone. He was too young, too full of his father's light for such dark emotions. But this man, Orochimaru, he made Naruto's skin crawl. He didn't show it, though. Instead, he offered a polite, practiced smile. To be on a mission with the legendary three is the real honor, Orochimaru-san. Naruto replied smoothly. Always so diplomatic, Tsunade snorted, crossing her arms. You're already stronger than the three of us combined, kid. Cut the act. Naruto frowned, shaking his head. It's not about raw strength, Tsunade. It's about merit. I have a long way to go before I achieve what you three have done for this village. Save the speeches, Jiraiya interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. I sense something. He wasn't wrong. In a flicker of movement, 3 figures landed in the clearing ahead. 2 boys and a blonde girl roughly Naruto's age, wearing Kumogakure headbands. The Kumo ninja froze as they realized who stood before them. The legendary Sannin. One of the boys, a dark-skinned shinobi with lazy eyes, gasped. Yujito, we have to retreat now. Tsunade blinked, looking between the enemies. What is this? They're just kids. Kids or not, Jiraiya murmured, eyes narrowing. That blonde girl feels off. The girl in question, Yujito, wasn't looking at the Sannin. Her sharp eyes were locked onto the redhead standing calmly in the center. You, she breathed, her stance shifting. You are the boy wonder. Yup. I can't believe it, she muttered, looking him up and down. You're actually real, and you're my age. Naruto's sweat dropped, his shoulders slumping. What is with people thinking I'm a myth? This blonde girl. Orochimaru's voice slithered through the air, monotone and dangerous. If I am not mistaken, she is the vessel of the Two Tails. Well, this is interesting, Naruto said, his gaze sharpening as he studied her. She was fierce, he'd give her that, and admittedly kinda cute. They know, Yujito realized with a jolt. She didn't hesitate. She dropped to all fours, a feral growl ripping from her throat. Why Yujito? You're doing that here? The second boy, C, shrieked. Stay back, Darui. C, Yujito commanded, her voice distorting. A burst of blue fire exploded around her, followed by a dense, suffocating cloak of red chakra. 2 tails formed behind her, whipping the air violently. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, Tsunade exclaimed, looking more annoyed than impressed. She can control her bijou? Kids these days should stay home. Naruto, however, stepped forward, his eyes alight with genuine curiosity. Kumo ninja are surely amazing. First B-san, and now you? To think someone my age can control a tailed beast. He clasped his hands together. But I can't let you do that. Before Yujito could complete her transformation, the earth rumbled. Wooden pillars erupted from the ground, twisting around her limbs and pinning her down. What is this? Yujito panicked, thrashing against the wood. My power. It's fading. She felt the Two Tails chakra being sucked away, suppressed by a force far beyond her. Naruto appeared instantly before her, his palm glowing with the kanji for sit. 10th Edict on Enlightenment. He pressed his palm to her forehead. The red chakra hissed and vanished instantly. Yujito's eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward, unconscious. Yujito! C yelled, his legs shaking. Yujito was their strongest, and this monster had just taken her out like she was nothing. C, calm down, Darui hissed, gripping his sword, though his own knuckles were white. We might die here. Orochimaru stepped forward, a kunai raised, his golden eyes gleaming with malice. Well, what a waste. Here goes. Stop, Orochimaru-san. The command was soft, but it froze the Sannin in his tracks. Don't kill her, Orochimaru hissed, turning his head slowly to look at the boy. What are you talking about, Naruto? She is a Jinchuriki. This is our chance to cripple Kumo permanently. Naruto turned. His blue eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth he usually carried. The killing intent he released was focused, sharp, and terrifyingly heavy. Try doing it, Naruto whispered, and see what happens. Orochimaru's eyes widened slightly. For a split second, he didn't see a boy. He saw Hashirama. He took a subtle step back, lowering the kunai. Jiraiya and Tsunade watched in stunned silence, realizing the boy wasn't asking for permission. He was giving an order. Naruto turned his gaze to the 2 trembling Kumogenin. You too, he barked. Take her, and tell your Raikage that he has already lost this war. All right, C stammered. Darui didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the unconscious Yujito, hoisted her onto his shoulder, and the three of them vanished into the trees, leaving the leaf ninja alone in the clearing. Damn, I want to see her again, Naruto thought dreamily. After the mission was technically complete, Orochimaru didn't linger. With a vague excuse about things to monitor, he melted into the forest shadows, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Night had fallen, and the only sound was the crackling of the campfire. To think I would actually have to worry about my oldest friend, Jiraiya murmured, his voice heavy with a sadness that rarely touched his face. He stared into the dancing flames, seeing memories instead of fire. He's just getting darker, colder. He is envious, Jiraiya. Open your eyes, Tsunade snapped. Though her voice lacked its usual bite, she flipped a skewered fish over the heat. First it was Minato and now, it's Naruto. He has always been an envious prick, chasing things he can't catch. Naruto said nothing for a long moment. He simply watched the firelight dance on his own grilled fish, his expression unreadable. As long as he remains harmless to the village, Naruto stated calmly, taking a bite, let him be envious. 10 years old Naruto. Shinobi of the Stone. I bear a decree from the Sandaime Hokage. Naruto stood alone, a singular flash of red against the gray, rocky landscape. 100 IWNs stared him down, their killing intent heavy in the air. Naruto extended the scroll, his voice cutting through the wind with an authority that defied his age. This is an offer of peace, a chance to end this conflict before more blood is spilled. The IWA commander stepped forward, snatching the scroll from Naruto's hand with a sneer. He didn't even read it. With a maniacal grin, he tore the parchment in two, letting the pieces flutter to the dirt like dead leaves. Naruto closed his eyes, resisting the urge to scream, not in fear, but in sheer, agonizing frustration. We will give you our answer right here, boy, the commander roared, drawing his blade as his men cheered, eager for the kill. Naruto opened his eyes. They were cold. Foolish, he thought, the annoyance bubbling into a dangerous calm. That Tsuchikage already sent 500 men to the Western Front to die against his father. And now, he sends another 100 here to die against him. He looked at the shredded hope for peace lying in the mud. He was done with diplomacy. Very well, Naruto stated softly. The air suddenly stilled. He brought his hands together, fingers locking into a familiar, terrifying shape. Mokuton. Naruto's boots skidded to a halt at the village gates, the dust settling around him. He had rushed here the moment he sensed their chakra signatures, a grin ready on his face to welcome his father's team home. But the grin died instantly. The silence that hung over them was heavy, suffocating, and wrong. Minato stood at the front, his usual warm, confident demeanor replaced by a mask of stone. His head was bowed, his uniform stained with dirt and dried blood. Beside him, Rin was trembling, her medical pouch looking untouched. And Kakashi, the silver-haired prodigy, looked like a ghost. He was staring at the ground, his left eye covered by a fresh, blood-soaked bandage. He looked small, broken. Naruto's blue eyes darted between them, counting. 1, 2, 3. His heart stopped. Where is Obito? Naruto demanded, his voice tight, the dread coiling in his stomach like a snake. Minato didn't look up. He couldn't. He simply closed his eyes and gave a slow, agonizing shake of his head. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Naruto took a stumbling step back, the air leaving his lungs. No, he whispered, the word shattering in the quiet morning air. No. 6 months later. I don't deny the will of stone, however. 600 of our forces were decapitated by the Yellow Flash and Boy Wonder. Dragging this war any further will have no value, Inoki stated, feeling humiliated. To think their nation would cripple before mere brats. What should we do, Sandaime? We will just accept Hiruzen's peace offer. Kurenai sighed, the tension of the last few years finally leaving her shoulders as she finished her dango. Finally, the war is really over. You're right, Asuma agreed, blowing the steam off his tea before taking a slow sip. We can finally breathe again. And not just that, Minato-sensei is officially becoming the 4th Hokage, Guy declared passionately, clenching a fist. But where is Kakashi? My eternal rival should be here. We should be celebrating the springtime of our youth together. Naruto frowned, staring at his half-eaten skewer. The sweetness tasted bland today. He's right there, Guy, Naruto said quietly. The group turned to look. Outside the dango shop, walking down the main street, was a lone figure. Kakashi didn't look left or right. His gaze was fixed on the ground, his path unerringly leading toward the cemetery. Guy immediately inhaled to shout a greeting, but Naruto raised a hand, stopping him. Leave him be, Guy, Naruto murmured, his blue eyes dark. I'll talk to him later. The table fell silent as they watched their friend walk away. First Obito, and now Rin, Kurenai whispered, her red eyes filled with pity. I wonder if he will ever bounce back from this. Naruto said nothing. He just watched Kakashi fade into the distance, a solitary shadow in a village full of celebration. Kakashi. Staring at their names won't bring them back, Kakashi. Naruto's voice was soft but firm as he stepped up behind the kneeling boy. You have to move on. You don't get it, Kakashi whispered, his voice cracking. He stared at the fresh stone, his single visible eye hollow. I was trash to him. I mocked him, called him a nuisance. And yet he died saving me. He gave me his eye. He gritted his teeth, his shoulders shaking. And then Rin. She's gone too. I couldn't protect either of them. I'm nothing but a failure. Naruto frowned, the pain evident in his own blue eyes. I don't have a medical jutsu to fix your pain, Kakashi. You guys. You were the closest thing I ever had to a team. He looked down at his friend, his hand hovering for a moment before dropping to his side. But you can't stay here forever. I don't know how you'll find the strength, but you will. You have to. Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating, as they stood watch over the graves of the friends they couldn't save. Naruto stood among the village's elite, the standard-issue green Jonin flak jacket fitting him snugly. To his left stood the Jonin commander, Shikaka Nara, looking unusually awake. To his right, his mother, Kushina, who was practically vibrating with pride. Naruto couldn't stop the smile from spreading across his face as he watched the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, lift the ceremonial hat. The 4th Hokage. The hat changed hands, red and white passing from the old generation to the new. The professor has chosen his successor, Naruto thought, his chest swelling with pride as he watched his father's back. He will be the one. He is the one who will finally bring us peace. We place our hope in you, Yondaime, Hiruzen said, his voice grave but warm. Minato took the hat, his blue eyes steel. He nodded, the weight of the office settling onto his shoulders. I shall protect it with my life. Jiraiya-sensei said Orochimaru was absolutely heartbroken over the decision. Naruto chirped, his voice dripping with satisfaction. He stood beside his father atop the newly carved stone face, a monument Naruto himself had sculpted in a single day using earth release as a coronation gift. The wind whipped at their hair, the village spread out below them like a map. Minato chuckled, adjusting the white robes that still felt new on his shoulders. I'm sure Orochimaru-san will come around eventually. You're too nice, San, Naruto scoffed, rolling his eyes. Seriously, the guy is a snake. You know, just give the order, and I'll finish him off. Minato didn't even dignify the foolish offer with a look, his gaze remaining on the horizon. There is nothing wrong with being kind, Naruto. Humph. If you say so. Naruto's gaze lingered on his father's back, admiring the kanji for fourth Hokage emblazoned on the white Haori. That coat really suits you, by the way. But I actually wanted to talk about Kakashi. He seems off. Minato's smile faded. He nodded slowly, his expression growing somber. I know. I've been thinking about assigning him to the ANBU. If I keep him close under my direct command, maybe I can help him heal. Naruto snorted softly, a flicker of amusement returning to his face. ANBU, huh? With that mask and his attitude? He certainly looks the part. Chapter 3. End of an Era. 11 years old Naruto. So, how is ANBU? Naruto asked, glancing at the silent figure beside him. Kakashi was fully geared in his gray vest and dark undersuit, the porcelain mask resting on his hip. Guy is worried, you know. He says you don't fight him as much as you used to. Naruto paused to lick his blue popsicle, humming in appreciation. This is actually really good. Guy overreacts. You know him, Kakashi replied flatly. He held his own popsicle loosely in his hand. Forgotten. A steady stream of melted blue juice dripped down the stick, staining his glove. He hadn't taken a single bite. He's just worried about you, Kakashi, just like the rest of us. Naruto watched the melting treat, his gaze shifting from his friend's face to his hand. You gonna eat that? Kakashi didn't even look up. He simply sighed, a long, tired sound, and handed the popsicle over. If I'm not mistaken, you must be AO. You caused quite the ruckus in the village after stealing that Byakugan, Naruto said with a terrifyingly casual amusement. He stood alone in the clearing, facing a squad of Kiri Hunter Nin. AO was the only one unmasked, his stolen eye hidden behind an eye patch. Boy wonder, O grunted, his hand hovering over his hilt. We are pursuing a target. Do not interfere with our business. Business? Naruto tilted his head. And what business is that? None of yours. Actually, it is, Naruto replied simply, his smile not quite reaching his cold blue eyes. You have trespassed onto the land of fire. Now you have two choices. Walk away, or I kill every single one of you right here. The air grew heavy with killing intent. AO looked at the boy, the one who had decimated armies in the last war, and weighed his options. He chose the wisest one. We retreat, AO barked, signaling his men. They vanished into the mist without a second glance. Naruto sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders as he watched them flee. A young, eager voice piped up from behind a tree. As expected, Naruto-sama, they just left without a fight. Naruto turned, a genuine smile softening his face as he looked at the 7-year-old boy with wild black curls and the Uchiha crest on his back. Well, they are the smart ones, Shursui, Naruto said, ruffling the new graduate's hair. Come on, let's go home. Shursui stared at the redhead's back, his dark eyes wide with absolute reverence. The stories, he realized with a jolt. They are real after all. You're pregnant? Naruto exclaimed, his face lighting up like the sun. The shock melted instantly into pure, unadulterated joy. I'm going to be a big brother. He didn't wait for a confirmation, launching himself at his mother and wrapping her in a careful, desperate hug. We still don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet, Minato stammered, his usual cool composure completely gone. He was vibrating with a goofy, nervous energy that Naruto had never seen before. I mean, names. We need names. What if it's a girl? What if it's a boy? We need a list. Narumi, Naruto stated firmly, cutting through his father's panic. He grinned, pointing a thumb at himself. Naruto and Narumi. We shall be the Naru siblings. Minato blinked, the name rolling around in his head. Narumi. His smile widened, soft and genuine. Narumi, I like it. It has a nice ring to it. What do you think, Kushina? Kushina looked down at her stomach, her eyes shimmering. It's a beautiful name. 1 year later, Naruto had shot up like a weed. At only 12 years old, he already stood at a towering 175 centimeters, 5 feet 9 inches, easily looming over his mother as he hauled the heavy grocery bags with casual ease. I still can't believe it. You're taller than me now, Kushina sighed, shaking her head as she looked up at him. At this rate, we'll have to stop calling you Boy Wonder. Maybe Man Wonder? She paused, grimacing at her own words. No, that sounds ridiculous. Naruto's sweat dropped, shifting a bag to his other hand. Pregnancy has really ruined your sense of humor, Ka-san. Shut up, brat. Oh, Kushina. Both mother and son turned to the familiar voice. Walking toward them was a beautiful woman with long, dark hair, cradling a toddler in her arms and guiding a quiet young boy by her side. Makoto, Kushina squealed happily, waddling over to her best friend. Look at that belly. You look ready to pop any second. Makoto laughed before turning her dark, teasing eyes to the tall redhead. And hello to you, Naruto-kun. Look at you. Getting more handsome every day, aren't we? Naruto felt his cheeks heat up slightly. Thanks, Makoto-san. He gestured to the bundle in her arms. And this little one must be Sasuke? Yes. And here. Makoto nudged the boy standing stiffly beside her leg. Come on, say hello. Itachi Uchiha looked up. His usually stoic, mature eyes were wide, filled with an uncharacteristic awe. He wasn't looking at a teenager. He was looking at a living legend. Naruto-sama, Itachi breathed, his voice hushed. He bowed deeply, a perfect 90-degree angle. I am very honored to meet you. Naruto blinked, then smiled warmly. Ah, if I'm not mistaken, you must be Itachi. Itachi straightened up, a faint blush dusting his cheeks. The boy wonder knew his name? Yes, sir. You know, he really looks up to you, Makoto teased, her eyes dancing with amusement as she exposed her son's secret. He keeps pestering Fugaku, asking exactly what you look like and if the stories are true. Keika-san, please, Itachi pleaded, his voice cracking. The stoic mask shattered completely, leaving a flustered boy burning with absolute embarrassment. Naruto laughed, a warm, easy sound that made Itachi's eyes shine even brighter. Well, Itachi, I can assure you most of the stories are right, but not that one. I didn't kill the third Raikage. Trust me, that man was a literal monster of nature. I don't think he can be killed by a human. He still did, though, Kushina murmured. The laughter vanished instantly. The atmosphere turned heavy, almost suffocating, as Kushina rubbed her swollen belly. Her eyes lost their teasing mirth, replaced by a deep, haunting fear. She looked up at her son, so tall, so strong, yet suddenly so fragile in her eyes. Even monsters die, Naruto. You can always get killed. Ka-san, Naruto murmured, his smile faltering at the sudden darkness in her voice. Makoto blinked, sensing the sharp drop in temperature. She let out a strained, awkward laugh, trying to fan away the gloom. Geez, Kushina. The pregnancy hormones are really making you morbid today. Anyway, we should get going. Fugaku is waiting for us. She gave a quick, apologetic wave and hurried Itachi along, escaping the heavy atmosphere. Naruto said nothing. He simply adjusted the heavy grocery bags in his hands and continued the walk home with his mother, the silence between them far louder than before. What was that back there, Ka-san? The question hung heavy in the air, disrupting the quiet clinking of chopsticks. It was just the two of them for dinner. Minato was still buried under a mountain of paperwork at the tower. It was nothing, Kushina murmured, pushing a piece of broccoli around her bowl, avoiding his eyes. Ka-san, Naruto said, his voice soft but insistent. Please, just tell me. Kushina sighed, a shuddering breath that seemed to take the fight out of her. She slowly lowered her chopsticks, the wood clicking against the ceramic bowl. Naruto, normal children don't become S-rank shinobi at 7 years old, she began, her voice trembling. They don't demolish entire armies before they even hit puberty. They don't face monsters like the Third Raikage and walk away unscarred. She looked up at him then, her violet eyes swimming with unshed tears. I'm afraid, Naruto. You are growing too fast. You are burning too bright. I fear that. That I'll die young? Naruto finished for her, his voice flat. Yes, Kushina admitted, the first tear slipping down her cheek. I fear that one day, this legend you've built, it will come back to haunt you. Naruto didn't say a word. He simply stood up, walked around the small table, and wrapped his arms around her trembling shoulders, pulling her into a tight embrace. I promise you, Ka-san, he whispered into her red hair, you will never have to live through that. 1 week later, Minato stood protectively behind Kushina's chair, while Naruto sat at the far end of the table. Kushina, for the safety of the village, you will give birth inside a barrier on the outskirts, Hiruzen explained as he took his seat beside his wife. Biwako and Taji from the ANBU will escort you. We are leaving right now, Biwako declared, her voice authoritative and sharp. Minato grasped Kushina's hand tightly, offering a reassuring squeeze. Don't worry, I will get everything ready. He shifted his gaze down the table. Naruto. Sir. As we agreed, you will stay here. If anything happens, you guard the village. Naruto frowned, clearly wanting to be involved, but he nodded respectfully. Yes, father. Before Kushina turned to leave, she surprised Naruto by pulling him into a tight, fierce embrace. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Naruto sat at his desk, mechanically swapping out scrolls, desperately trying to fix his attention on anything other than his family. But then he froze. A sudden chill settled over the room, not from the cold, but from a pressure that slammed into his senses. It was a dense, suffocating malice, so powerful and ancient that it made his breath hitch. No! The realization hit him just as a deafening roar tore through the night, shaking the very foundations of the house. The QB was out. Itachi bolted through the chaotic streets, his small lungs burning as he scanned the wreckage for his father. The ground shook violently, and he stumbled, clutching the bundle in his arms tighter. Then the sky went dark. He looked up to see a massive shadow descending rapidly. A colossal slab of stone dislodged from a building, falling directly toward him. He froze. There was no time to run. Accepting his fate, he squeezed his eyes shut and curled his body around the infant in his arms, shielding his brother with his own life. Wham! A deafening impact shattered the air, but the crushing weight never came. Instead, a shockwave of dust blasted over them. Ha! Itachi gasped, opening his eyes. Standing before him was Naruto, his fist still extended. The massive boulder had been reduced to a cloud of fine gravel and dust. Itachi, get your brother and get to the shelter immediately, Naruto ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. Itachi scrambled to his feet, awestruck. Why yes, sir. With a blur of motion, Naruto vanished, reappearing instantly beside the third Hokage atop a roof overlooking the devastation. Naruto. Good. Hiruzen barked, his adamantine staff already in hand. I will push it out of the village walls. You restrain it. Yes, sir. Naruto turned his glare toward the monstrosity before them. The wind howled around him, whipping his hair and coat dramatically as the beast roared. His heart hammered in his chest. He was terrified for his mother, his sister, his father. But when he witnessed the teleportation barrier of relief washed over him, his father was fighting. If he was alive, then his mother was alive. Enma, now, Hiruzen ordered before his staff elongated. Suddenly, the QB was shoved backward, skidding violently out of the village gates under the force of Hiruzen's assault. The beast recovered instantly, its slit red eyes locking onto the tiny figures daring to oppose it. Now, Naruto. Naruto didn't hesitate. He slammed his hands together in a snake seal, channeling a torrent of chakra into the earth. Wood release. Wooden dragon jutsu. The ground exploded upwards. A colossal wooden dragon burst from the soil, its timber jaws roaring silently as it lunged, coiling its massive body around the nine tails, binding its limbs and muzzling its jaws. Now is our chance. Attack him with all you've got. Hiruzen commanded the gathering forces. This is bad, Sandaime. I can barely hold it. Naruto gritted out through clenched teeth. Sweat poured down his face as he felt the sheer, overwhelming power of the beast straining against his jutsu. To think it would be this strong. Just buy us as much time as possible. Naruto dropped to one knee, his breath hitching in ragged gasps. His hands trembled as he held the snake seal, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. The Kyuubi wasn't just fighting the jutsu, it was tearing through it, the massive wooden dragon splintering under the sheer force of its malice. Suddenly, the beast's mouth fell open, dark chakra condensing rapidly into a terrifyingly dense sphere. Naruto's eyes widened in horror. Tailed beast bomb. This bastard. It's doing it again. Hiruzen gritted out, bracing himself. But before the sphere could fully form, the sky seemed to fall. Boom! A colossal toad crashed down from the heavens, landing squarely on the Kyuubi's back and slamming its muzzle into the dirt. Yondaime! The frantic Anbu shouted. Father! Naruto yelled, realizing instantly what was happening. He scrambled to his feet, reaching out, but it was already too late. In a flash of yellow, both Minato and the Kyuubi vanished. The battlefield fell into a stunned, ringing silence. Minato! Hiruzen breathed, staring at the empty crater. He teleported the Kyuubi away. A heartbeat later, the horizon lit up. A catastrophic explosion erupted in the distance, shaking the ground beneath their feet and turning night into day. Sandaime, right there. Naruto pointed urgently toward the rising mushroom cloud. Let's go. Move out. Hiruzen commanded, leaping forward with Naruto right beside him. I can still do it, Minato, Kushina rasped, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. She bit her lip until it bled, forcing her exhausted chakra to flare one last time. Clang! Adamantine chains erupted from her back, shooting through the air to bind the Kyuubi, pinning its massive claws to the earth. The beast roared, thrashing against the golden binds. Damn, Kushina whispered, her gaze softening as she looked at the crying bundle in Minato's arms. Looks like I woke up Narumi. She looked back at the fox, her eyes resolute. I will take the Kyuubi with me. Into death. Minato's eyes widened. No, Kushina. Don't look at me like that, Minato. She chuckled weakly, blood trickling down her chin. I'm so glad you loved me. You and Naruto and this little lady. If I do this, I can save you all. No, there is no need for that, Minato interrupted, his voice trembling but his resolve like steel. I will seal half of the Kyuubi inside myself using the Shiki Fujin, and the other half, I will seal it inside Narumi using the Hack Fuin. Kushina's eyes widened in absolute horror. No, that jutsu will kill you. Have you forgotten about Naruto? He needs his father. He can't face this world without you. Minato looked at his wife, a sad but trusting smile touching his lips as he thought of their firstborn. Did you forget who our son is, Kushina? Kushina paused. The panic in her eyes slowly faded, replaced by a tired, knowing smile. He is the boy wonder. Naruto stood frozen behind the shimmering barrier, his blood turning to ice as he recognized the hand seals his father was weaving. Snake, boar, ram, hare. It was the Shiki Fujin, the Reaper death seal. Hot tears blurred his vision, spilling down his cheeks as he watched the nightmare unfold. The Kyuubi roared, its massive claw lunging forward to skewer the infant, only to be intercepted by flesh and bone. Crunch. Naruto stopped breathing. He watched, paralyzed by the barrier, as the beast's claw impaled his parents. He watched his mother, blood dripping from her lips, use her final moments to whisper love and warnings to his crying baby sister. Naruto, Hiruzen murmured nearby, his voice trembling, unable to find words for the tragedy. In the span of a single night, his entire world had been annihilated. Then, a blinding light engulfed the clearing. The Kyuubi vanished, sealed away forever. The golden chains dissolved into sparks, and the barrier flickered and died. Minato and Kushina collapsed. Naruto didn't run. He vanished, reappearing instantly beside their fallen forms. He stood there, his hands shaking violently at his sides. The silence of the forest was louder than the roaring beast had ever been. He stared down at the corpses of his parents, the pool of blood widening beneath them, staining the grass crimson. His legs gave out. He crashed to his knees in the dirt, his head bowing low. "She knew," Naruto whispered, his voice cracking as a sob ripped through his chest. "She felt it coming." He reached out, his trembling fingers hovering over them, afraid to touch the cold reality of death. "I'm so sorry," he choked out, the tears falling freely onto his hands. "If only I was stronger. If only I was older." "Narumi, you poor girl." Naruto's voice was barely a whisper. He stared down at the infant in the crib, his gaze lingering on the complex, spiral seal etched into the soft skin of her stomach. She shifted in her sleep, a tuft of golden hair catching the dim light. "She is blonde, just like father." A sharp pang of grief hit him. He could vividly imagine the beaming smile Minato would have worn holding her, a happiness that had been stolen in an instant. To bear such a heavy burden at such a tender age, Hiruzen murmured, his voice thick with sorrow. He sat in a simple chair across from Naruto, pointedly avoiding the Hokage's desk. That seat felt like a tombstone now. He couldn't bring himself to claim it. "She will handle it," Naruto said softly, tracing the curve of her cheek. "She must. It is the only way to honor father and mother's sacrifice." A melancholic smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Naruto," Hiruzen began, but the air in the room suddenly shifted. A swirl of leaves materialized in the center of the office, revealing an ANBU operative kneeling with his head bowed low. "What is it, ANBU?" Naruto demanded, his tone hardening instantly. "Sandaime-sama, Naruto-sama," the operative reported hastily. "The counselors and clan heads have convened an emergency session. They are awaiting your presence immediately." Silence hung in the air for a heartbeat, followed by an explosion of killing intent. "What do you mean, a meeting? Lord Fourth hasn't even been buried yet." Naruto's roar shook the glass in the window frames. The ANBU flinched visibly, terrified by the sheer ferocity radiating from the boy. I apologize, sir. I am merely relaying orders." Hiruzen remained seated, his expression turning grim. He was more practical than Naruto, but the disrespect of the timing made his blood boil. His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Who called for this assembly?" The ANBU hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Danzo-sama." Naruto moved with the speed of a lightning strike. He thrust the sleeping baby into the arms of the bewildered ANBU guard outside the hall and turned toward the heavy oak doors. Boom! The doors didn't just open. They exploded inward, splintering off their hinges and crashing into the far wall. Hiruzen followed close behind, his face a mask of grim fury. "You despicable vultures! How dare you!" Naruto's roar shook the very foundations of the tower. He stood in the wreckage of the doorway, his eyes blazing as he surveyed the assembly. The clan heads, Choza, Shikaku, Fugaku, Inoichi, Hayashi, Tsum, Shibi, and the elders, Hamura, Koharu, and Danzo. The clan heads shot to their feet, hands instinctively reaching for weapons pouches. For a split second, a terrifying thought crossed their minds. We survived the Nine Tails, only to die here? And Naruto, please calm down, Hamura stammered, raising a trembling hand. His plea died in his throat instantly as the redhead turned his gaze upon him, a look so cold it froze the elder in his seat. Lord Fourth's body isn't even cold yet, and you are already holding meetings to carve up his legacy? Naruto spat, stepping into the room. Danzo, was it you who called this session? Hiruzen stepped forward, his voice dripping with disgust. Have you absolutely no shame? Danzo remained seated, his solitary eye narrowing but his posture rigid. We are here to ensure the stability of the village, Hiruzen. We must discuss the disposition of the asset, the Jinchuriki. The air didn't just get heavy, it crushed them. It wasn't just killing intent anymore, it was raw, tangible chakra. The floorboards groaned and splintered under the invisible weight. The room began to shake violently, dust falling from the ceiling like rain. Naruto took a single step forward, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that carried more weight than his shouting ever could. What did you just call my sister? Naruto, restrain yourself, Hiruzen shouted, though sweat beaded on his forehead. He had never seen the boy this volatile. Naruto looked ready to burn the entire building to the ground. Danzo's stone face turned into sweating mess. He was no fool. He felt the Reaper's scythe against his neck. He knew with absolute certainty that one wrong syllable would end his life right there. T the Fourth's daughter, Danzo corrected, his voice tight. Naruto held the stare for a terrifying second longer, the air crackling with energy. Then he closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. The crushing pressure vanished instantly. Around the room, the clan heads slumped, gasping for air they hadn't realized they were holding. My apologies, Naruto stated simply, though his voice was devoid of warmth. You can imagine the depth of my grief today. He swept his gaze across the room, locking eyes with the elders and clan heads. As for my sister, Narumi is not to be discussed. She is not to be approached. And as for anyone who dares to even think of her, the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. I will kill them. He let the words hang in the air, a promise rather than a threat. Now I shall return to mourn in peace. I do not want Anbu popping out of nowhere in my house. Is that clear? Without waiting for an answer, Naruto turned and walked away. The heavy silence of the meeting hall was broken only by the rhythmic, echoing tap, tap, tap of his footsteps fading into the corridor. I knew this was a bad idea, Shikaku exhaled, slumping back into his chair and wiping cold sweat from his brow. We nearly died just now. I have never seen him that angry, Tsum muttered, a rare shiver running down her spine. That wasn't just anger. That was pure bloodlust. His parents just died, Shibi replied, his voice a flat, logical drone as he calmly adjusted the rim of his dark glasses. What exactly did you expect? Hiruzen let out a long, weary sigh. He stared at the splintered remains of the door for a moment before turning his glare toward his shameless old friend. I hope you are satisfied, Danzo? Danzo remained silent. His visible eye lingered on the empty doorway, the cold reality finally settling in. Converting the Jinchuriki into a faceless asset was no longer an option. This meeting is adjourned. We will continue this after the funeral, Hiruzen ordered. 1 week later, Naruto sat alone at the dinner table, his unseeing gaze fixed on the wood grain. The house was silent, save for the faint, rhythmic breathing of his sister sleeping peacefully in the nursery they had prepared for her. The adrenaline of his earlier outburst had faded, leaving a cold pit of guilt in his stomach. Crashing the meeting had been inappropriate. He had let his rage blind him to the reality that the clan heads were suffering too. Their compounds were in ruins. They were desperate for leadership and stability, not threats. He had already sought them out individually to apologize. To his relief, they had brushed it off, their eyes filled with sympathy rather than resentment. They understood his pain even if his delivery had been extreme. After the funeral, a blur of black clothes and rain, he had retreated here. True to his demand, no one had approached the house since. Not neighbors, not friends, not even the ANBU. He was truly alone. Danzo, Naruto thought, burying his face in his palms. He is just like that snake, Orochimaru. I need to be careful around him. A dark, intrusive thought whispered in the back of his mind. Why not just kill him? His fingers tightened against his scalp. He had made the mistake of hesitation with Orochimaru, waiting for proof, waiting for a slip-up, only for the traitor to escape. The cost of that mercy had been high. No, what is happening to me? Naruto froze, horrified by his own train of thought. Since when was murder his first instinct? Since when was he this bloodthirsty? With a heavy, trembling sigh, he pushed himself up from the table. He wandered down the darkened hallway until he reached the one door he had been avoiding. His parents' room. He stood there for a long moment, the silence ringing in his ears. His hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling slightly, but he couldn't bring himself to turn it. He dropped his hand. Turning away from the ghost of their memory, he retreated into Narumi's room and closed the door. Chapter 4. Medical Ninja. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral. The grief was still there, a dull ache in his chest, but Naruto had found a way to silence it. Work. He wasn't just coping, he was rebuilding. Literally. Standing in the center of a devastated residential district, Naruto wiped sweat from his brow and grinned, channeling a massive surge of chakra into his legs. Wood-style, serial pillar houses. He slammed his palm onto the scorched earth. Rumble. The ground didn't just shake, it surged. Thick wooden beams erupted from the soil like growing trees, weaving together with unnatural speed. Walls formed, roofs slanted into place, and intricate porches shaped themselves out of raw timber. In seconds, a row of 20 sturdy, 2-story homes stood where there had been nothing but rubble. Gasps of awe rippled through the gathered crowd of construction workers and homeless villagers, followed by a roar of applause. As expected of Naruto-sama, one of the foremen shouted, throwing his helmet in the air. At this rate, the village will be rebuilt in no time, a woman cried, tears in her eyes as she looked at her potential new home. Of course it will, Naruto exclaimed passionately, his voice booming over the cheers. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the joy of creation rather than destruction. This is Konoha. We must rebuild it in not time. He cracked his knuckles, looking at the next empty lot with burning determination. Now, point me to the next district, Naruto demanded, turning to the logistics officer beside him with a grin, still riding the high of the construction. Oda hesitated, his finger tracing down the clipboard. That would be the Uchiha district, sir. However, there has been a significant change in the zoning plans. Naruto blinked, his grin fading slightly. A change? What do you mean? Their compound has been relocated, Oda explained quietly, lowering the clipboard. To the outskirts of the village, Naruto-sama. Naruto froze. The outskirts? That was practically isolation. Relocated? Naruto repeated, his voice dropping. Where exactly, Oda? Near the Naka River, far from the center. Naruto frowned, a shadow crossing his face as the political implications settled in. He stared at the horizon for a long moment, saying nothing. Finally, he gave a sharp, decisive nod. Let's go. So, Fugaku-san, Naruto asked, looking over the barren plot of land designated for the main house. Do you want the head family's estate larger than the standard? Or perhaps a different architectural style? It matters little, Fugaku grumbled, staring at the dirt with a scowl etched deep into his face. The indignity of the relocation was clearly gnawing at him. Just get it done, Naruto. Fugaku, Makoto scolded sharply, stepping forward. Be more polite. Naruto-kun is here to help us rebuild when he has 1,000 other duties. Fugaku crossed his arms, looking away like a petulant child. I said nothing wrong. Naruto laughed, a warm, disarming sound that cut through the tension. Please, don't worry about it, Makoto-san. I've known Fugaku-san long enough to be used to his unique charm. We are truly in your debt, Naruto-sama, Itachi said softly, bowing his head with perfect, respectful form. Naruto waved a hand dismissively, his expression brightening. Don't thank me, Itachi. I am just doing my job as a shinobi of this village. He cracked his knuckles and turned toward the empty field, his chakra flaring to life. Now stand back. Let's build the Uchiha home. How is my little one? Naruto cooed, tossing the giggling bundle of joy high into the air. I've been busy, Narumi. Sorry for leaving a clone with you all day. Hap, she babbled, drool bubbling at the corner of her mouth as she clutched at the air. You don't even know what a clone is, right? Naruto chuckled, catching her with practiced ease and laying her gently on her back. She kicked her legs, content, allowing him a moment of silence to pick up the heavy medical tome resting on the table. He was already a spectacular medic, his skills forged by the legendary hands of Tsunade and the wisdom of Hashirama, Senju himself. But he wasn't reading to save a life today. He was reading to find inner peace. The intricate diagrams, the flow of chakra, the absolute precision required for high-level medical ninjutsu. It was a meditation. It was the only thing that quieted the noise of the world and the burden of his reputation. He needed to get better, not for war but for himself. He needed this peace. 3 months after Kyuubi attack. I'm leaving, Naruto. Naruto said nothing. He remained seated in the high-backed armchair, his profile illuminated only by the flickering orange glow of the hearth. He stared intently into the fire, as if reading a story in the burning logs. A mission? He asked finally. No. Tsunade hesitated, her grip tightening around the strap of her bag. She looked down, unable to meet his back. I'm leaving the village. Indefinitely. I have nothing left here. Naruto didn't move. He didn't blink. Is the village itself not enough for you? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Tsunade opened her mouth to speak, to explain the suffocating grief, the ghosts on every street corner, but no words came. There was no answer that wouldn't sound selfish. Just leave, Tsunade. It wasn't a command, nor was it permission. It was a dismissal. Tsunade stiffened. She gave a sharp, jerky nod, suppressing the sting in her eyes. She turned on her heel and walked to the entryway. But as her hand touched the cold brass of the doorknob, she froze. Be safe, he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. All right? 2 years after the Kyuubi attack. Oh, come on, Narumi. Listen to your big brother. Naruto sighed in exasperation, brandishing a spoonful of banana pudding like a peace offering. Nah, Nisan. Narumi huffed, crossing her tiny arms and turning her head away with dramatic flair. Naruto blinked, the spoon hovering in midair. Where did you even learn that attitude? Goodness! His battle of wills with the toddler was interrupted by a soft knock at the front door. Setting the bowl down, he wiped his hands and went to answer it. He opened the door to find the Uchiha matriarch standing there with a warm smile, accompanied by her eldest son, Itachi, who was wearing a fresh, gleaming forehead protector. Makoto-san. And young Itachi, too. We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by to check on you, Makoto explained gently. Naruto-sama. Itachi greeted with a respectful bow. You've done well. Please, come in, Naruto said, stepping aside to usher them into the warmth of the home. As soon as they entered the living room, Makoto's eyes lit up. Oh, look who's here. If it isn't little Narumi, she cooed, crouching down to scoop up the blonde bundle of cuteness. Grhhh, Narumi grumbled, narrowing her eyes at the intrusion. Makoto froze, a large sweat drop appearing on her brow. Did she just growl at me? Ignore her. She's a moody one today, Naruto chuckled, gesturing for them to join him at the table. Please sit down. I heard you graduated, Itachi? Itachi nodded as he took a seat, his posture perfect. Yes, sir. Lord Third thought it was suitable. The Sandaime thought correctly, Naruto agreed, pouring tea for his guests. Special talents must be cultivated carefully. Itachi hesitated, his gaze lowering to the steaming cup in his hands. I wanted to ask you something, Naruto-sama. Naruto raised an eyebrow, sensing the boy's seriousness. What is it? I've been hearing rumors that you have barely taken any missions since the Kyuubi attack. Some people are whispering that you have retired. Naruto's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He glanced at Makoto, who was frowning deeply as she bounced a skeptical Narumi on her knee. Retired? Naruto shook his head, a mix of amusement and confusion on his face. I am certainly not retired. I work at the hospital daily. I am the head of the hospital and the best medical ninja in this village. Well, since Tsunade left, anyway. But what about being a shinobi? Itachi pressed, his young eyes searching Naruto's face. A combatant? I am a shinobi, Itachi, but nothing necessitates my presence on the battlefield these days. Besides, sending me to other villages would cause havoc. Naruto replied calmly, leaning back in his chair with a knowing look. We are in peaceful times. I am simply appreciating that peace, just like everyone else should. Itachi looked down, seemingly embarrassed. I apologize if I crossed a line. Naruto smiled gently at the polite genin, his expression softening into one of brotherly warmth. When it comes to you, I would never be offended. Just don't listen to whispers, deal? They call me retired. Can you believe the audacity? Naruto exclaimed, throwing his hands up in amused disbelief. He slumped back into the chair across from the Hokage's desk, crossing his arms with a huff. Those Uchihas, I never liked them. No wonder Tobirama-sama always kept a wary eye on the lot of them, he grumbled. Hiruzen chuckled, puffing on his pipe. Well, you certainly didn't seem to hate them when you personally rebuilt their entire compound from the ground up. Naruto rolled his eyes, waving a dismissive hand. That was duty, nothing more. They are part of the village, and the village must be whole. You know, Hiruzen began, leaning forward slightly, I could assign you a high-profile mission, clear up the doubts once and for all. Naruto shook his head immediately. No need. Rumors are just wind. If something actually requires my attention, I know you will find me. Besides, the hospital needs me. Hiruzen offered a warm, knowing smile. Just make sure you don't get rusty, my boy. You are 14, not 40. Naruto stood up, a confident smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Don't worry when it comes to that, Sandaime. Looks like you haven't found your peace yet, Naruto said softly, his footsteps silent on the grass as he approached the lone Nbu standing guard over the dead. I believe. I am not as strong as you are, the silver-haired ninja replied, his voice muffled behind the porcelain mask. Not as a shinobi, but as a person. Naruto stopped beside him, looking out at the rows of stone. I just bury myself in the work, Kakashi. It helps. Seeing people smile because I was there, it quiets the noise. I bury myself in work, too, Kakashi murmured. Naruto turned his head, his blue eyes piercing. Thrusting your hand through people's chests on a daily basis will never heal you. Kakashi stiffened. He turned slowly, the blank eyes of his mask staring at the redhead. Since when were you this soft? I don't know, Naruto sighed, turning his gaze back to the gray sky. I guess I'm just growing up. 3 years later. Young lady, come here at once. Naruto's clone stood with his arms crossed, tapping his foot as the little blonde girl trudged toward him, looking thoroughly annoyed. What is it now, Nisan? You didn't wash the dishes. Yeah, maybe because I was busy training? She huffed, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. And, Naruto raised an eyebrow. Can't you just create a shadow clone to handle the chores while you train? Narumi blinked blankly. What? Naruto paused. Right? He would never get used to this. He simply couldn't comprehend that his little sister, or anyone, really, wasn't as instinctively skilled as he was. I was spamming jutsu when I was her age, he thought, a faint, nostalgic smile touching his lips as he remembered his sensei's grueling lessons. Fine, he sighed, crouching down to her level. I will teach you a jutsu. Narumi's annoyance vanished instantly, replaced by beaming, unadulterated joy. Really? Please, Nisan. But then her excitement faltered. She tilted her head, looking at him with genuine confusion. But, wait, Nisan. What is it? Aren't you just a doctor? She squinted at him suspiciously. Do you actually know any real jutsu? Naruto froze. He stood there, utter horror etched onto his face. Somewhere inside the hospital, the original Naruto dropped his teacup. She thinks I'm a loser, Naruto muttered, his voice muffled as he buried his face in his palms, elbows resting heavily on the tea shop table. A loser? Guy slammed his teacup down, staring at Naruto with wide, incredulous eyes. But Naruto, there is literally a statue of you in the center of the village. A monument to your youthful brilliance. How can she possibly think that? There is nothing written on it, Guy, Naruto groaned without looking up. It just says, the boy wonder. To her, that's just some random guy in stone. Asuma scratched his beard, looking thoughtful. Well, maybe show her a jutsu or two. You know, something flashy? Oh God! Naruto dragged his hands down his face, looking utterly defeated. I tried. I showed her would clone and shadow clone. She just laughed. Asuma's sweat dropped. Seriously, Naruto clones? Naruto, look at me, Kurenai said softly, placing a comforting hand on his trembling back. You are arguably the greatest shinobi in the entire elemental nations. The 5 Kage themselves couldn't hold a candle to you. Just relax. She's just a baby. 2 years later. Ha! Now that hit the spot. Naruto sighed contentedly, setting his empty bowl on the counter with a loud, satisfied clack. Beside him, Narumi eyed the greasy, orange remnants of the broth with undisguised suspicion. That doesn't look healthy. It isn't, Naruto corrected cheerfully, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. It is happiness. That is why we consume it in moderation. TSK, you're just a nerd, she scoffed, poking at her own vegetables. Naruto grinned, puffing out his chest with mock indignity. Hey, show some respect. Say, did you ever hear about the legendary Konoha's boy wonder? Narumi gave him an incredulous look, one eyebrow raised perfectly. The boy wonder? Please, that's nothing but a myth. Naruto blinked, his grin faltering slightly. What are you talking about? It was obviously just wartime propaganda created by the village, she stated matter-of-factly, waving her chopsticks. I mean, think about it logically. A 10-year-old child fighting the Third Reikage to a standstill and forcing an entire battalion to retreat? Seriously? It's physically impossible. The smile didn't leave Naruto's face, but the light behind his eyes died instantly. The restaurant noise faded into a dull, distant buzz. You are real. The boy wondered. So you really exist. He's just a demon. How can a mere child terrify me like this? The screaming voices of dead men echoed in his skull, overlapping with the scent of blood and ozone. The impossible things he had done. The childhood he had traded away. Yeah, Naruto muttered, his voice suddenly hollow, staring blankly into the dregs of his soup. Just a myth. Narumi paused. She noticed the sudden shift. The way his shoulders slumped as if under a heavy weight, and the way his eyes seemed to look through the counter rather than at it. Her teasing died in her throat. Is something wrong, Nisan? Naruto blinked, forcing the mask back in place. I'm fine. Narumi narrowed her eyes, studying his face. No, you are not. Naruto walked in silence through the cemetery, the morning mist clinging to his cloak. In his hand, a bouquet of white lilies bloomed into existence, petals unfurling with a quiet pulse of his chakra. Reaching the familiar stone, he knelt, placing the flowers gently against the cold granite. Tusen, Kasen, happy anniversary, he whispered, his voice soft in the quiet air. He traced the names carved into the stone, a faint smile touching his lips. Narumi is growing up so fast. She is splendid, and she is calm, much calmer than I ever was at 7. Can you imagine that? Naruto let out a soft, dry laugh, shaking his head. To think I would grow so soft. His smile faltered slightly as he looked down at his hands, hands that had demolished armies, now used to heal cuts and wash dishes. She actually thinks I'm normal medic who cooks me. The amusement faded, replaced by a heavy, bittersweet silence. Just like the souls that haunts me. She think the boy wonder is a myth. I'm home. Naruto stepped into the Genkan, kicking off his sandals. He blinked, surprised to see a second shade of blonde in the room. A lighter, platinum hue distinct from his sister's sun-kissed hair. Oh, we have a guest. I'm Yamanaka Ino, sir. The girl stood up quickly, having to crane her neck quite a bit to look up at the towering man standing before her. Naruto's eyes widened in recognition, a warm, genuine smile spreading across his face. Inoichi's daughter. Goodness, you were barely a toddler the last time I saw you. He crouched down to eye level, his sudden proximity making the blonde girl blush faintly. I will tell him you said hello, she stammered. Please do, Naruto chuckled, straightening up. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything, Narumi. He gave them a wave before disappearing down the hall. Ino watched him go, her eyes sparkling. You know, Narumi, your brother is actually really nice, Ino gushed, leaning in close to her friend. And he is so tall. He's fine, Narumi replied flatly, clearly not seeing the appeal. I don't know, Narumi. My dad weirdly adores him. He even told me that he is the boy wonder everyone talks about. Narumi froze. She stared at Ino with wide, incredulous eyes, her jaw practically hitting the floor. Ni-san? She sputtered. The boy wonder. Don't be ridiculous. That's exactly what I said. A pink-haired girl sitting beside them finally chimed in, rolling her eyes. Narumi's brother? A legend? Please, he is just a medic. Those fools. That fucking fence-sitter geezer. Anoki. The thought seethed in Naruto's mind, cold and sharp. How could a man his age be so foolish as to break the peace now? Naruto stood in the doorway of his living room, his blue eyes sweeping over the 3 Iwa Jonin standing in his home. His sister, Narumi, was backed against the wall, a kunai shaking violently in her hand. She was sweating, hyperventilating, terror written in every line of her body. And Ni-san, run away! She screamed, her voice cracking. She wasn't scared for herself. She was terrified for her gentle, medic brother. Get out of here. But Naruto didn't move. He didn't even blink. Narumi's eyes widened in confusion as the room suddenly went deathly silent. The IWA Jonin, seasoned killers who had been ready to slaughter her a moment ago, were backing away, their weapons lowered, their knees knocked together. It was as if they had seen a ghost. That red hair," the leader whispered, the color draining from his face until he was sheet white. "The boy wonder? It's him." The screams of dying men from the last war echoed in their minds, drowning out their orders. Naruto simply closed the door behind him, locking it with a soft, final click. "Let me guess," Naruto said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Here to finish off the Yellow Flash's offspring? Why, you are alive," one ninja stammered, dropping his sword. Look, we don't want trouble. We were just following orders," the leader begged, raising his hands in surrender, sweat pouring down his mask. Please, we didn't even touch her. I swear on my family, we didn't touch her." "What is happening here?" Narumi's mind raced, her gaze darting frantically between her harmless big brother and the three trembling assassins. One moment, she was staring death in the face. The next, the executioners looked like they were the ones praying for mercy. "I really don't want to slaughter you in front of my little sister," Naruto stated, his voice devoid of emotion, as if he were discussing the weather rather than a massacre. "She is young, impressionable. I'm sure you understand." "Why, yes," the leader yelped, clutching at the lifeline. "Oh, of course. She is just a child. A lot of blood wouldn't be good for her. We understand perfectly." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Good. Now, leave." They didn't need to be told twice. In a blur of desperate speed, they vanished through the window, leaving the shutters rattling in their wake. They were always so fast at running away," Naruto muttered softly to the empty window, amusement coloring his tone. "Brings back memories." He turned, the cold killer vanishing instantly as he crouched before his sister. Narumi was still pressed against the wall, her kunai slipping from numb fingers as she gaped at him in total bewilderment. "They didn't touch you?" She managed a shaky, terrified shake of her head. Naruto let out a heavy sigh of relief, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "Good." He pulled her into a firm, protective hug, shielding her from the lingering fear in the room. "Ni-san," she whispered, trembling against his chest. What just happened?" "Nothing," Naruto murmured, stroking her hair calmly. "They just had some flashbacks, that's all. Go to sleep, Narumi." The very next morning, the heavy doors of the Konoha Barrier Division were nearly kicked off their hinges. "Where is Kakoi?" Naruto demanded, his voice thundering through the quiet hall. A chunin with a bandage across the bridge of his nose immediately stepped into his path, blocking the way. "Sir, you can't just bust in here like this. This is a restricted area." "Ha!" Naruto stopped, looking down at the chunin with disbelief. "Who the hell are you? Out of my way." "I said stop." Kotetsu reached for his weapon, ready to retaliate, but he was suddenly yanked back by his terrified partner. "Why, you fool? Stop!" Izumo hissed, his face pale as he gripped Kotetsu's vest. "Do you want to die? That is Namikaze's Naruto." Kotetsu froze, his eyes widening as he looked up at the redhead. What? You mean, the boy wonder?" "Naruto-sama, what is wrong?" Kakoi, the captain of the barrier team, came sprinting out of his office, sweating profusely at the sheer density of the killing intent flooding his headquarters. Naruto turned his glare on the man, who gulped audibly. "You," Naruto snarled, stepping into Kakoi's personal space. "3 IWA Jonin infiltrated my house yesterday. My little sister was a hair's breadth away from death. What the hell is this barrier for if it can't even detect enemy chakra?" I apologize, sir. Kakoi stammered, trembling. I was on vacation yesterday. The shift change must have. Show me the barrier seal, Naruto commanded, cutting off the excuses. Maybe it needs fixing. But sir, Kotetsu interjected, trying to regain some authority. You don't have the clearance to. Naruto didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes locked on the captain, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. Kakoi, I'm hearing someone talking. Do you hear it too? Kakoi turned to his subordinates. Izumo, Kotetsu, go back to your posts immediately. Narumi held her breath, pressing herself flat against the alcove wall until the heavy iron door clicked shut. She waited 10 agonizing seconds for the guard's footsteps to fade down the corridor before she slipped out of the shadows. With shaking hands, she pulled 2 metal hairpins from her bun. Click, scrape, click. The lock to the restricted archives, a room meant only for the Hokage's eyes, yielded. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old secrets. Narumi clicked on a small flashlight, holding it between her teeth as she rifled through the cabinets. Nisan's history has to be here, she thought, her heart hammering against her ribs. She scanned the labels alphabetically. Nah. She smirked. Namikaze, Naruto. Gotcha. She pulled the thick folder free and flipped it open. But as her eyes scanned the summary page, her smirk vanished. She gasped, the flashlight trembling in her mouth. Asterisk Academy graduation, age 5. Asterisk Chunin promotion, age 6. Asterisk Jonin promotion, age 8. Asterisk abilities, would release. Asterisk mentor, the first Hokage Senju Hashirama. Jonin at 8, and trained by the first. Her mind raced, struggling to comprehend the words on the page. She frantically flipped to the mission logs, hoping for an explanation. What she found were not reports but autopsies of battlefields. Mission log 284. Intelligence confirmed 100 IWA shinobi supported by 200 Kumo ninja en route to Amigakure. The battle was projected to devastate the Rain Village. I chose to intercept. I cut off their route and ambushed the coalition solo. Result: total elimination. This can't be real. Mission log 312. Assessment: Allied forces possessed insufficient capability to engage the Kiri battalion. I advanced beyond the front lines alone to resolve the conflict. Enemy count: 500 units. Status: neutralized. 500. Mission log 405. Engagement with the 4th Kazekage, Raza. He required a lesson in hierarchy. I provided it. Suna shall never dare raise a finger against Konoha again. The folder slipped from Narumi's numb fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud that echoed in the silent room. She stared at the scattered papers, feeling like her mind was fracturing. He wasn't just a doctor. He wasn't even just a ninja. What is he? The oppressive weight of Naruto's chakra vanished as quickly as it had arrived. There, Naruto murmured, wiping a smudge of ink from his thumb as the barrier seal hummed with a renewed, steady rhythm. The sensory detection frequency was slightly off-sync. It won't happen again. He turned around, the terrifying boy wonder gone, replaced by a sheepish, slightly embarrassed man. He looked at the Chunin with the bandage across his nose, who was still stiff with adrenaline. I apologize for my outburst earlier, Naruto said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture that shocked the room. My sister's safety, it clouded my judgment. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. Kotetsu blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. No, sir. It's understandable. And you? Naruto continued, stepping closer and placing a firm hand on Kotetsu's shoulder. Standing your ground against me? Apparently because of protocol? That takes guts. Most people would have folded. Kotetsu is committed shinobi, Sir Kokai added with smile. Naruto grinned, his blue eyes crinkling warmly. You're a good shinobi. Come on, grab your partner. Lunch is on me today. I hear the barbecue place has a discount. Naruto hummed a soft, peaceful tune as he stirred the stew, the savory aroma of herbs and root vegetables filling the warm kitchen. He found himself enjoying these quiet moments more and more lately. He suspected he had inherited this love for cooking from his mother. Click. The sound of the front lock tumbling interrupted his musings. I'm home, a voice called out from the hallway, sounding smaller than usual. In the kitchen, Naruto replied cheerfully, tapping the wooden spoon against the pot in a rhythmic beat. Narumi walked down the hall, her footsteps unusually heavy. She stopped at the kitchen doorway, her hand gripping the frame until her knuckles turned white. She stared at the scene before her. There he was, cooking dinner, humming. How is this possible? She gazed at his broad back. He looked so utterly normal. Well, aside from the cascading fiery red hair and his ridiculous height, he looked like any other big brother. A little goofy, a little strict, completely harmless. But the file, and what happened yesterday, ambushed 500 soldiers alone. Taught the Kazekage a lesson. Konoha's boy wonder. She shook her head violently, trying to banish the words from the archive. No, that monster isn't real. Nissan is just a nerdy doctor who likes gardening and scolding me about dishes. Is something wrong, Narumi? Naruto didn't turn around. He didn't stop stirring. His voice was calm, casual, yet it cut through her thoughts like a kunai thrown in the dark. Narumi froze, her heart skipping a beat. He saw through me. Without even looking? I am fine, Nissan, she stammered, forcing her voice to remain steady. Well, if you're fine, get the table ready? Naruto said, finally glancing over his shoulder with a warm, unsuspecting smile that made her stomach twist. Stew's done. Narumi nodded stiffly. She moved robotically to the cupboard, grabbing the plates with trembling hands. As they sat down to eat, the usual banter was absent. Narumi stared at her reflection in the soup, silent and terrified, wondering just who exactly was sitting across from her. How is it? Naruto asked, breaking the silence as he munched on his rice. It's fine, Narumi muttered, pushing the carrots around her plate with her chopsticks. You've barely touched it. I said it's fine. Naruto blinked, surprised by the sudden outburst. He set his bowl down slowly, deciding to pivot to safer territory. Next week you start the academy, he said, forcing a cheerful tone. The first step to becoming a ninja. Do you want any tips? Narumi didn't answer immediately. She stabbed a piece of broccoli, her eyes narrowed. Hey, Nissan, why don't you ever go on missions? Why do you spend your whole day safely in the hospital? Naruto smiled. Because I'm a medic, Narumi. What is wrong? Narumi looked up, her gaze piercing. Were you healing people when you were my age? The smile faltered. No. Why? Because. At what age did you graduate? She demanded, her voice rising. Naruto looked away. 5. And when did you become a jonin? Why are you asking so many questions? Naruto snapped, his patience fraying. I'm not a fool. You think I didn't notice how the assassins escaped just by looking at you? Narumi yelled, slamming her hands on the table. Enough! The word didn't just leave his mouth. It exploded out of him. For a split second, his control slipped. The air in the kitchen grew instantly heavy, crushing, and hot, suffocatingly dense with chakra. Crack boom. The solid oak dining table didn't just break. It disintegrated. Splinters and sawdust exploded outward, raining down onto the floor like confetti. What is this? Narumi gasped, shielding her face from the debris. She lowered her arms slowly, staring at the pile of wood chips that used to be their dinner. She looked up at her brother, her eyes wide with a primal, instinctual fear she had never felt before. Naruto froze. The red flush of anger drained from his face, replaced by absolute horror as he saw the terror in his little sister's eyes. "Narumi, I'm so sorry," he stammered, reaching out a trembling hand. "I didn't mean to." Narumi took a step back. She stared at him, the pieces finally clicking together. The rumors, the inexplicable respect from the clan heads, the darkness that sometimes flickered in his eyes. "Holy shit," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You represent the myth, the boy wonder." Naruto sighed, leaning back in his chair, or where the table used to be. "I never claimed to be a myth, and that name wasn't Konoha's propaganda. It was Kumo's." Naruto's chest heaved as he spoke, his voice rough with the memory of war. He looked at his sister across the ruin. The terror he had seen in her earlier was gone, replaced by a burning, unyielding need for the truth. "They lied to their own shinobi," Naruto said, his eyes darkening. "They sent them to the slaughter again and again, telling them I wasn't real. Because the alternative, that a single child was wiping out their battalions, was too terrifying for them to accept." He saw the look in her eyes, the realization. "You," Naruto narrowed his eyes. "You broke into the archives." Narumi gave a small, guilty nod. Naruto groaned, rubbing his temples aggressively. "Why are you like this, Narumi?" he lamented. "Why couldn't you just be a normal, simple girl who likes playing with dolls or chasing boys? Goodness." He looked up at her, genuinely baffled. "How did you even get in there? The security seals are top tier." Narumi fidgeted with her sleeve. I picked the lock." "With what?" "My hairpins." Naruto froze. He stared at her, his expression shifting from exhaustion to sheer, baffled incredulity. "You picked a chakra-reinforced adamantine lock? With hairpins?" Narumi tilted her head, catching the slip. "So, you know about the door's security? Will you stop asking questions?" Naruto roared, throwing his hands up in defeat. "Of course I know about the door. I'm the one who designed it. I built that security specifically to keep that disgusting snake Orochimaru out, not to be picked by a 7-year-old with a fashion accessory. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I had to know." Narumi cried, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "That day at Ichiraku when you talked about the boy wonder, you looked so haunted. I just wanted to prove it was all a lie. I wanted to prove that my brother is just a nerdy doctor who likes gardening." Naruto didn't yell. He didn't even move. His voice dropped, becoming cold and precise. "What did you read?" Narumi swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she recited the words that had burned themselves into her memory. "That you slaughtered 100 IWA shinobi and 200 Kumo ninja before they could even reach Amigakure." Naruto closed his eyes. He didn't need to look at a file. The words were etched into his soul. This happened after he defeated Jiraiya Sensei's students. The battle was projected to devastate the Rain Village. I chose to intercept. I cut off their route and ambushed the coalition solo. Result? Total elimination. He opened his eyes, looking at her with a soft expression. "That is the line, isn't it?" Narumi could only nod, paralyzed by the accuracy of his recitation. "I see." Naruto sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders, replaced by a heavy, crushing exhaustion. "I will have to change the seals on the archive tomorrow." He knelt down, pressing his palm flat against the floorboards. A pulse of green chakra rippled through the room. The pile of splinters and sawdust from the ruined dinner table groaned, the wood twisting and knitting itself back together until a pristine, polished oak table stood in its place, as if it had never been broken. "You clean up the kitchen, then go to sleep." He turned toward the stairs, his hand lingering on the banister for a moment. "I cooked tonight because I wanted us to have a nice time. Like a family," he said softly, not looking back. "But I suppose, just like with father and mother, being a normal family was never in our blood." With that, Naruto walked up the stairs into the darkness, leaving her alone in the silence. She couldn't sleep. She squeezed her eyes shut, tried to count sheep, tried to recite shinobi prohibitions. Anything to quiet her mind, but sleep refused to come. Every time she drifted off, the image of her brother destroying the table with mere chakra flashed behind her eyelids. Creak. The door to her room opened slowly, casting a long, thin slice of hallway light across her bedspread. Narumi stiffened, instantly shutting her eyes tight and forcing her breathing to slow, mimicking deep sleep. "I know you are awake, Narumi." His voice was soft, but it carried that undeniable weight of certainty. There was no point in pretending. She opened her eyes, blinking against the sudden light. Her brother stood in the doorway, still fully dressed, his silhouette framed by the darkness of the hall. "What is it, Ni-san?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Naruto didn't step inside. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "Get up. I want to show you something." "Can I ask you something, Ni-san? Just, please don't get mad," Narumi asked, her voice hushed as they walked through the empty village streets. "It's a little late for that, isn't it?" Naruto sighed, though his tone wasn't angry. "Go on." Narumi hesitated, kicking a pebble across the cobblestones. "How exactly did you teach the fourth Kazekage a lesson?" Naruto stopped walking. His eyes widened slightly. "You read that file too?" Seeing her nod, he let out a long, weary breath, rubbing the back of his neck. A look of genuine shame crossed his face, not for the mission's success, but for what he'd done. "I wrapped his wife in a suffocating embrace of wooden branches," he admitted quietly, staring at the ground. "And I told him that if his sand ever spilled a drop of Konoha blood again, I would crush them both." Narumi gasped, stopping in her tracks. "Why you did that?" Naruto looked up at the moon, his expression distant. "Yeah, I was 10, Naruto corrected himself, his gaze drifting up toward the stone face of the fourth Hokage on the mountain. "Father had just taken the hat. I thought I needed to make an example, to show the world that the yellow flash wasn't the only thing they had to fear." Narumi stared at him, unable to comprehend that level of ruthlessness in a child. How did father and mother react to that? Naruto let out a dry, nostalgic chuckle, shaking his head. "Father never liked Raza personally, but he still grounded me for a month for dragging a non-combatant, his wife, into the conflict. It was unbecoming," he said. Naruto's smile faded slightly, his expression turning somber. "But mother, she didn't scold me. She was just worried. She feared I was growing up too fast, losing the part of me that was still her little boy." "Did you?" Naruto blinked, looking down at her. "Lose myself? Of course not. It was a wartime decision. She likely forgave it, or maybe she didn't. I suppose I'll never know." He stopped walking, gesturing to the open space before them. "We are here." Narumi looked around at the overgrown, silent forest clearing. "A training ground?" "The Senju training ground," Naruto corrected, his voice tinged with reverence. Narumi's eyes widened as she pieced it together. "Where you used to train with the first Hokage?" "Smart girl," Naruto murmured. He turned to face her fully, the moonlight casting long shadows across his face. "You broke into the archives because you wanted the truth, right? You wanted to know if the stories were real." "Yes," Narumi answered without hesitation. "Very well." Naruto simply brought his hands together in a single, fluid motion. Snake. The air didn't just vibrate, it screamed. The earth beneath their feet groaned as if a sleeping giant were waking up. Massive roots erupted from the soil, twisting and braiding together with terrifying speed. In seconds, the ground fell away as a colossal wooden construct rose into the night sky, blotting out the moon. Naruto stood atop the head of the entity, a wooden golem the size of a mountain, rivaling the Nine Tails itself in sheer scale. What is this? Narumi gasped, craning her neck back until it hurt, her eyes reflecting the monstrous wooden titan looming over the village. This is amazing. The wood golem, Naruto announced simply. He dropped from the colossal wooden head, landing beside Narumi with the lightness of a feather, a stark contrast to the titanic monster looming behind him. This is a power capable of rivaling even the Uchiha's ultimate defense, the Susanoo. Narumi blinked, tearing her eyes away from the wooden giant. What? Naruto paused, realizing he was getting too technical. He shrugged. Let's just say, it rivals a tailed beast, like the one inside you. Narumi went still, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. The Nine Tails. Yeah, Naruto muttered, glancing back at the wooden construct with a grim smile. That fox really hates me. And this technique is exactly why. Why, Nisan? Why did you never tell me any of this? Narumi asked, her voice small against the backdrop of the wooden titan. Because you are 7, Narumi, Naruto replied gently. You are a genius, yes, but you are still just 7 years old. You were 7 when you became whatever is this, she countered, pointing an accusing finger at the golem. Naruto's expression hardened for a fleeting second. I was an anomaly. Also, I couldn't do this at 7. He turned away, the conversation effectively over. Now let's go. Swish, swish, swish. The air around them rippled. In the blink of an eye, 20 ANBU Black Ops materialized, forming a tight perimeter around the siblings, tantos drawn. Nisan, Umbu, Narumi gasped, clutching Naruto's sleeve, terrified that they were about to be arrested for treason. She looked up at her brother, expecting fear. Instead, he threw his head back and laughed. You are afraid of the ANBU? Goodness, Narumi, get a grip. Before Narumi could process his reaction, the lead ANBU, a kunoichi with distinctive purple hair, dropped to one knee. Behind her, the other 19 operatives immediately followed suit, bowing their heads in unison. Naruto-sama, the captain groaned, her voice a mix of deep reverence and utter exasperation. What exactly are you doing? Whoa, easy there, Yugao. Naruto grinned, waving a hand dismissively. Sorry about the noise. Just showing my little sister some tricks. Sir, please do not use my real name while I am in mask, Yugao sighed, looking up at the colossal wooden construct that was blocking out the stars. And with all due respect, that trick is the same size as the Nine Tails. You have sent the entire village into a panic. I suppose I should have used a weaker jutsu to make my point, Naruto admitted, rubbing the back of his neck with a sheepish grin. My bad. Narumi didn't hear him. She was too busy staring mouth agape at the surreal sight before her. 20 of Konoha's most elite killers, the terrifying ANBU Black Ops who were rumored to have no emotions, were currently kneeling in the dirt, heads bowed in absolute submission. To her brother. The same brother who wore a silly apron while cooking stew. The same brother who got excited about new gardening shears. The same brother she had called a nonsense medic just days ago. She looked from the bowed heads of the assassins up to the titanic wooden golem blocking out the stars, and finally back to Naruto's casual, smiling face. The boy wonder wasn't a myth. He was standing right next to her, complaining about causing a scene. Naruto walked beside his sister, wearing the simple Jonin black outfit without the flak jacket. Well, Naru, I wish I had some sage wisdom for you, he admitted, scratching the back of his neck as they approached the bustling crowd of parents and children. But I never really had an academy life. I graduated in 2 months, so I have absolutely nothing to tell you. He grinned down at her. Just try to have fun? Narumi nodded silently, gripping her backpack straps as the academy gates loomed ahead. Naruto. The familiar voice cut through the chatter. Naruto paused, turning to see a man with a scarred face and a pineapple ponytail lazily approaching them. Shikaku-san, Naruto greeted, his smile widening. He looked down at the boy standing beside the Jonin commander. A boy with the exact same droopy eyes and bored expression. Damn, this is your son? You didn't even try, did you? He's a walking shadow clone. Shikaku let out a bark of laughter, clapping a hand on his son's shoulder. This is Shikamaru, and you have no room to talk. That's exactly what we used to say about you and Minato. Shikaku teased, his eyes crinkling with nostalgia. The only difference was that bright red Uzumaki hair. Naruto smiled, placing a hand on his sister's shoulder to nudge her forward gently. Nice to meet you, Shikamaru. And this is Narumi. Hello. Narumi mumbled, dipping her head slightly. Shikamaru blinked, his gaze drifting from the girl to the tall redhead. He let out a small puff of air, scratching his head. Hi, you're Namikaze's Naruto, aren't you? The boy asked, his tone bordering on a complaint. My mom won't stop nagging me about you. She keeps going on about how she fought by your side in the war. Be like Boy Wonder, she says. He was more accomplished than all of us at your age, she says. What a drag. Naruto laughed sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck as a bead of sweat formed. He remembered Yoshino well, terrifying woman. Beside him, Shikaku let out a long, suffering sigh, clearly sharing the burden of living with said woman. Please, Naruto chuckled. Tell Yoshino-san I said hi. How did I never notice this before? Narumi stood frozen, clutching her backpack straps as she watched the scene unfold. Parents weren't just waving at him. They were swarming him. They were practically lining up, pushing their flushed, nervous sons and daughters forward. This is my boy, Naruto-sama. He wants to be a hero just like you. Please, just one word of advice for him. They looked at him with such reverence, such desperate hope that a fraction of his brilliance might rub off on their children. And Naruto, he didn't look surprised. He smiled, bowed, and shook hands with the practiced ease. I'm such a fool, she realized, the weight of her ignorance settling in her stomach. 6 months later. Now, students, listen up. Irika's voice cut through the chatter of the academy courtyard. He stood before a weathered stone monument, his ponytail swaying as he gestured grandly. This is the statue of the Boy Wonder. The class looked up. Carved into the rock was the likeness of a young boy, no older than they were now, standing casually with one hand resting on a massive scroll that stood taller than him. Boy Wonder, Kiba scoffed, crossing his arms behind his head. Seriously? Is this guy even real? Sounds like a bedtime story for babies. A murmur of agreement rippled through the class. To them, he was just a myth parents used to scare them into behaving. Irika's eye twitched violently. A vein popped on his forehead. You disrespectful brats! He roared, startling the front row. Of course he is real. That is Namikaze Naruto-sama, the son of the 4th Hokage and the personal student of the 1st Hokage. This statue was commissioned by the daimyo himself when Naruto-sama was only 10 years old. The yelling died down, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Namikaze, Sakura whispered, her eyes widening. She turned slowly. Wait, like Narumi? In an instant, 30 pairs of eyes snapped toward the back of the group. Narumi, the top student of her year, froze as the weight of their collective gaze hit her. She shifted on her feet, clutching her bag strap. He is, she started, her voice quiet. She looked at the statue, at the stone face of the brother she thought was just a gardener. He is my elder brother. The courtyard exploded. What? The tall redhead? No way. He looks so normal. I don't know, he's hot though. Narumi tuned them out. The noise of her classmates faded into a dull buzz. She stepped forward, ignoring the whispers, and looked up at the statue. It was real. The scroll, the confidence, the legend carved in stone. A warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the confusion. She squared her shoulders, a small, secret smile touching her lips as she gazed at the monument. Ni-san, she thought, her heart swelling with a newfound, overwhelming pride. You are amazing. The Uchiha lunch table was a sanctuary of silence, broken only by the rhythmic clinking of porcelain and chopsticks. It was a heavy, disciplined quiet that Sasuke usually respected, but today, his curiosity won out. They showed us the boy wonder statue today, Sasuke whispered, glancing between his father and brother, hoping for a flicker of interest. That is nice, Sasuke, Makoto said warmly, offering him a smile. What did they tell you about him? They said he is Namikaze Naruto, the chief of medicine at the hospital, Sasuke said, his brow furrowing in confusion. But can a simple medic really be that powerful? The boy wonder is very real, Sasuke, Itachi interjected smoothly, his voice filled with that rare, unwavering respect. And I can assure you, it is Naruto-sama. But Ni-san, Sasuke protested, his voice rising slightly. They said he was an S-rank shinobi at my age. How is that even physically possible? I never understood it either. The table froze. Fugaku Uchiha, the man who rarely spoke during meals and never indulged in idle gossip, had set his chopsticks down. His dark eyes were distant, looking at something far beyond the dining room walls. He was 8 years old when we fought side by side, Fugaku murmured, his voice low and grave. I watched grown men, veterans, flee in terror at the sight of a child. Those who didn't run simply ceased to exist. Such brute strength, such cold efficiency at such a tender age. Fugaku looked at his son, his expression stark. He terrified me. Oh, hush, Makoto scolded lightly, waving her hand dismissively at her husband's grim tone. Naruto is a perfectly nice young man, Fugaku. Stop being so dramatic. You never saw him out there, Makoto, Fugaku said, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to suck the warmth right out of the room. He didn't look at her. He stared into his tea, watching the steam rise like the smoke of a battlefield. Sometimes, I genuinely wondered if he was even human. The silence that followed was deafening. Sasuke's eyes went wide, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. Even Itachi, usually unshakable, paused, his gaze flickering to his father with a new intensity. Makoto's smile faltered, her hand freezing on the teapot. But no one said a word. Slowly, mechanically, the Uchiha family picked up their chopsticks and resumed their dinner. ANBU captain, at 13? Impressive, Naruto murmured, his eyes scanning the confidential file as he sat across from the third Hokage. He is an exceptional child, Hiruzen agreed, puffing on his pipe. The smoke curled around his weary face. Mature beyond his years. Efficient. Perhaps too efficient. Naruto smiled softly at the attached photograph of the young Uchiha. I know. A gentle soul. I can sense it. The Uchiha are indeed impressive. First Shisui, and now Itachi. Hiruzen sighed, setting his pipe down with a heavy clatter. He looked at the redhead across from him, not as a subordinate, but as a savior he was waiting for. Naruto, it has been years since you last accepted a field mission. You bury yourself in the hospital wards or vanish into the Shikatsu forest for training. The old man leaned forward, his voice cracking with vulnerability. Why won't you take this hat from me? This weight. It is becoming too heavy for my old shoulders. Naruto looked up, his expression unreadable. You think I am ready? Hiruzen let out a dry, humorless chuckle. You already act more like a Kage than I do. I feel my grip slipping, Naruto. Every decision feels like a mistake lately. Naruto frowned, his voice firm and commanding. Do not say that. We are all your students, Hiruzen-sama. If you are referring to the Hyuga incident, it was a tragedy, yes, but Hizashi made a choice to protect the village. He gave his life for Konoha, just as any of us would. Hiruzen closed his eyes, accepting the comfort, even if he didn't fully believe it. I will speak to the daimyo, though. In truth, there is little to discuss. The decision was made long ago. The day Minato took this office, it was already decided. Naruto froze. What do you mean? Hiruzen smiled, a sad, nostalgic look entering his eyes. The very day your father became Hokage, he spoke privately with me and the Fire Daimyo. He named you his successor then and there. Unofficially, of course. But his intent was clear. Tusan. Did that? Naruto whispered, his voice trembling. He didn't just see you as a son, Naruto, Hiruzen said softly. He saw you as a friend, comrade. Perhaps because the age gap between you was so small. You two shared a bond one have never seen before or since. Naruto said nothing. He couldn't. He simply turned his head, his vision blurring as he gazed up at the portrait on the wall. The fourth Hokage stared back, so cold in paint, so calm in expression, yet so utterly gentle in memory. Talk to the daimyo. I'm ready. 1 week later. Look at you. First in every single subject. As expected from Dad's girl. Naruto beamed, his chest swelling with pride as he aggressively ruffled his sister's hair. Narumi swatted his hand away, blushing faintly. It was easy anyway. There is only one first place, Narumi. That means it wasn't easy. Naruto corrected gently, his pride undimmed. Narumi nodded, fiddling with her report card. She looked up at him with sudden curiosity. You always call me that Dad's girl. Why? Naruto's expression softened. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the ghost of the yellow flash in her stance.